Chapter 300. The next day, it was almost time to leave the medical center. Chu Qingyin originally wanted Mu Ling to send Xining and the others to a safe and hidden place and wait for them to return safely from the Jiang Kingdom before picking them up. Unfortunately, Master, this servant also wants to go with you. Xining followed behind her with a bundle in her arms, unable to be shaken off. Chu Qingyin facepalmed. Girl, we're not going to play. We have an important task to take care of. Then why can Jean Xin go with you? The little girl was jealous. Jean Xin, who had just recovered and was wiping his sword, felt that he was inexplicably implicated. Chu Qingyin pulled her hand and said earnestly, Jean Xin has martial arts. He can protect himself and protect me. What can you do? Xining pouted. Xining can accompany Master to pass the time when you're bored and take care of your basic necessities. You just have to worry about your own matters. This servant can take care of everything. Chu Qingyin shook her head and laughed. In the past, this girl was not so bold. After following her for so long, she dared to beat around the bush and argue with her. All right, I'll reluctantly agree. Xining was so happy that she spun around on the floor, making the people moving the luggage at the side unable to restrain their laughter. Qing Yi, LVE, and the others were all arranged to a safe place by Chu Qingyin. Other than Chu Qingyin and her two servants, the rest were Xiao Su and Xiao Lai Chi. Chu Qingyin was a little curious. Big Ice Cube, don't you have anyone to take care of you? Don't I still have you? Xiao Su crossed his arms and looked at the orderly and busy people, as if he was just casually replying. Chu Qingyin was stunned. Big Ice Cube was too good at making his own decisions. Master, this servant will take care of you, and you will take care of His Highness. Is it like what you said before? The big fish eats the small fish, and the small fish eats the shrimps? Xining asked innocently. Chu Qingyin rolled her eyes at the sky. That's enough. By the way, I haven't seen Gu Rong or Gui in a long time. Chu Qingyin was a little late to realize that they were gone, but she couldn't remember when they disappeared. She was actually afraid of the two of them, but she didn't know why. After I sent you off, I sent them away, Xiao Su said indifferently. Why? Is it because they were arranged by your mother? Chu Qingyin thought of this reason. She would never forget that because of Empress Liang, these two had always liked her. Xiao Su nodded. I always feel uneasy with my mother's people by my side. It's better to let them go. Hearing this, Chu Qingyin understood. For example, this time they were going to the Jiang Kingdom. If Gu Rong and Gu Yi were still there, they would definitely leak the news. The more people knew, the more dangerous it would be. Chu Qingyin looked at the back of the person who was facing her, and her heart was filled with emotions. In order to reassure her mother, he tolerated being watched. This feeling was really uncomfortable. Only the big ice cube could be so magnanimous and tolerant. They wandered around the courtyard for half an hour. They could set off in another hour, but she didn't see Yin Luo when she woke up early in the morning. She felt strange and ethereal. Who was beside her gave her an illusion that he was unhappy. Where's your Yin Luo? Chu Qingyin bumped his arm. Ethereal shook his head. Did the battle succeed? Chu Qingyin didn't give up and asked again. He shook his head again. Chu Qingyin sighed faintly. It seemed that Ethereal had failed. She turned her head and asked Xiaofeng. After learning that Yin Luo was in her room, Chu Qingyin went to her room alone. Chu Qingyin walked to the door and was about to knock, but she was shocked when she saw the room was wide open. Sister Yin Luo, what happened here? Were you robbed? Chu Qingyin carefully avoided the bottles and jars that were strewn all over the floor before walking in. Then, she saw a person moving around with her back, facing her among the pile of junk. Unpacking. Chung Yin Luo was focused on rummaging through the things and casually replied, Are you sure you're packing and not destroying things? Chu Qingyin couldn't help but ask. If she hadn't seen it with her own eyes, she would have never imagined that a girl's room could be so messy. When she heard this, Chung Yin Luo raised her head and looked at her with an ungrateful expression. Little girl, if it weren't for you, why would I be rummaging through things? I'm a clean freak. Because of me? Chu Qingyin felt that she had been given such a title out of the blue. She was extremely shocked. Nonsense. Do you know how many snakes, insects, rats, and ants there are on the way to the Jiang Kingdom? If you don't take precautions, the journey will be very difficult. Chung Yin Luo tossed the medicine bottle in her hand. Fortunately, I made a lot of ointment in my spare time. It will come in handy this time. When Chu Qingyin understood her words, she was instantly overjoyed. She opened her arms and was about to pounce on her. Sister Yin Luo, you agree to go with us? That's great. Chung Yin Luo didn't push her away. Instead, she smiled and said, didn't you say that if you hate someone, the best way is to stay by his side and torture him? After so many years, I still can't forget the pain he caused me. Why should he be free and unfettered outside? Once I'm done torturing him, I'll kick him away and take revenge for all these years. Chu Qingyin's hands couldn't help but tremble. When did she say such things? Did she have selective amnesia? She retracted her hands and rubbed her nose. Ethereal, you have to take care of yourself on this journey. All right, I've finished packing. Little girl, prepare a carriage for me. It has to be spacious, comfortable, and bright. I know you can do it. Thank you in advance. Chung Yin Luo flung the bundle over her shoulders and waved at her. Chu Qingyin looked at the waving claw in front of her and had an impulse to chop it off. However, when she saw the bright smile on her face, Chu Qingyin couldn't help but laugh. She suddenly had a feeling that this trip would leave her with an unforgettable memory. She followed the person who was humming in front of her and returned to the courtyard happily. The preparations were almost done, and it was time to set off. When Ethereal saw Chung Yin Luo carrying a bundle, she was undoubtedly stunned. What are you looking at? If you keep looking, I'll gouge your eyeballs out. Chung Yin Luo coughed softly and raised her voice to hide the uneasiness in her heart. I didn't expect that you would really come with us to the Jiang Kingdom. Even someone who was usually eloquent would stutter one day. I'm not doing this for you. After saying that, she waved her finger at Chu Qingyin. Double the reward. Chu Qingyin face-bombed. She really knew how to do business. At this moment, Turin, who had gone to scout ahead, returned. However, there was an indescribably strange expression on his face. Master, young princess, look who's here. Turin moved aside, and the person behind him pounced on him. Long time no see. Father is here. Chapter 301. Father? Chu Qingyin looked at the man in front of her in disbelief. He was dressed in shabby clothes and had a head full of withered leaves. He was the father she had been thinking about day and night. After the shock, she couldn't help but go forward to hug him. However, when she opened her arms, the man passed by her and strode to the person beside her. What's going on? She heard, son-in-law, Daddy is here. Did you miss Daddy? Chu Qingyin turned around and held her forehead. Why did she have the illusion that she wasn't her biological father? The corner of Xiao Su's mouth twitched as he looked at his father-in-law who was running towards him. Master Chu. Mr. Chu smiled and nodded to him. Then he turned around and patted his daughter's head. Kai, Daddy is here. Chu Qingyin also twitched her mouth. Was the son-in-law first and the daughter second? However, when Mr. Chu looked back at the man in front of him, his smile suddenly disappeared. Son-in-law, why is your face so pale? Did Kai not take good care of you? Chu Qingyin covered her eyes. Daddy, how could you say that? Not wanting her father to continue talking nonsense, Chu Qingyin took his hand and asked in surprise, Daddy, why are you here? Where's Mom? Your mom? She can't walk anymore. She's resting for a while. I think she'll be here soon. Mr. Chu scratched his head and looked out of the door. Speak of the devil. At this time, Mrs. Chu, who was riding in with Xiao Lai, looked around the crowd. When she saw her daughter, her eyes reddened. Kai, Mom. When Chu Qingyin saw her, her eyes also reddened. She immediately ran up to her. After the mother and daughter hugged each other, Chu Qingyin asked, Mom, why are you and Dad here? Didn't we agree to let you wait for us in the capital? When Mrs. Chu heard this, she felt a little helpless. It's all because of your father. He kept making a fuss about coming to look for you. Ever since you left, he's been nagging at me. A month ago, he suddenly made a fuss. Since he had nothing to do, he suggested that we bring him out for a walk. I see. Chu Qingyin nodded. Then how did you find this place? Some time ago, The news that the King of England punished the corrupt officials spread widely. We followed the news all the way here. When we arrived at Yangxia County, we met the Turin. Mrs. Chu felt sad when she recalled the journey, but the result was good. Chu Qingyan could feel the hardships and tribulations her mother had experienced in those few words. Master Chu, how did you end up like this? Xining was a little surprised. It's all because she wanted to climb the tree and look into the distance, but she fell down instead, Mrs. Chu said with a smile. Everyone pursed their lips and chuckled. Due to the arrival of Mr. and Mrs. Chu, the departure time was postponed until the afternoon. Xia Feng instructed the servants to prepare hot water for the two of them to freshen up. At this moment, Chu Qingyan and the others were waiting in the main hall. Sister Yin Luo, I came to the clinic because I wanted to trouble you to take a look at my father. 10 years ago, he was injured on the battlefield and was sent back. He ended up in this state. After so many years, no one has been able to cure him. Chu Qingyan sighed softly before she spoke to Cheng Yinluo. Cheng Yinluo put down her teacup. When she saw Mr. Chu earlier, she felt that something was wrong. Now that Chu Qingyan mentioned it, she nodded. Maybe he was hit by a heavy object, which caused the blood flow in his head to be blocked. I'll take a look at him later. Thank you, Sister Yinluo. Chu Qingyan's eyes were slightly red. She and her mother had been worried about her father's illness for many years. They had almost given up hope. Previously, they had received the information provided by Ethereal, but it had brushed past her. She had thought that it would take a while longer, but her parents had unexpectedly arrived. Chu Qingyan felt that sometimes a freak combination of factors could be unexpected and surprising. At this moment, Mr. Chu strode out, looking refreshed. Mrs. Chu followed closely behind him with a smile. Mother, this is Cheng Yinluo, Dr. Cheng. She's the doctor that I told you about. Let her take a look at my father later. Chu Qingyan introduced her to her mother. Then, she turned around and introduced her to Cheng Yinluo. Sister Yinluo, this is my mother. Your mother is so young. She's so beautiful. I couldn't tell that she had a daughter as old as you. Cheng Yinluo wasn't stingy with her compliments. She said politely to Mrs. Chu, Hello, Aunt Chu. You can just call me Yinluo. Of course. My Dan Yang used to be the most beautiful woman in the capital city, Mr. Chu said proudly. Mrs. Chu was embarrassed by the compliment. She glared at her husband and smiled. Yinluo, I'll leave my husband in your care. You're welcome, Cheng Yinluo replied. Chu Qingyan called her father, who was nestled next to the ice cube, over. However, her father complained, Kai, I haven't finished telling my son-in-law about the first day. I actually saw a beetle as big as a rock. Mrs. Chu couldn't help but say, Yuan, how many times have I told you? That was a rock. Oh, Mr. Chu nodded. Then he suddenly became excited. Kai, I also saw a dog as big as a bear. A dog as big as a pig? Chu Qingyan was puzzled. Mrs. Chu put her hand to her forehead. It was a black bear. He ran into its den. Fortunately, the black bear was hibernating, so it didn't chase after him. Chu Qingyan's lips twitched. She felt extremely lucky to see her father safe and sound at this moment. At this moment, Cheng Yinluo had already started to take Mr. Chu's pulse. Everyone in the room was looking at the two of them with rapt attention. Mr. Chu scratched his head and said to his daughter, Kai, why are they all looking at me? Is it because I'm very handsome today? She had accidentally blurted out the words handsome and handsome in the past. However, it was obvious that her father was a fast learner. He often mentioned it now. Yes, you're very handsome. Chu Qingyan agreed with a blatant lie. However, to be honest, her father was indeed very handsome. She heard that he was one of the top 10 handsome young men in the capital city. Mr. Chu turned to ask Mrs. Chu the same question in high spirits. After receiving Mrs. Chu's affirmation, he turned to ask his son-in-law. Xiao didn't want to pay attention to him at first. However, in order to make him listen to him obediently, he nodded subtly. Mr. Chu was even more arrogant now. Cheng Yinluo, who was frowning while taking Mr. Chu's pulse, gave up. She stood up and put her hand into Mr. Chu's hair. She pinched his head and looked around. Finally, she relaxed her brows and withdrew her hand as if she had found the cause. How is it? What's the cause? Can it be cured? Chu Qingyin asked anxiously. Although Mr. Chu often teased them, Hualing, Turin, and the others also looked nervous. Chapter 302. Cheng Yinluo met everyone's anxious gazes and smiled. I've already found the cause of his illness. You don't have to worry. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. But Cheng Yinluo hesitated for a moment, but succeeded in tugging at everyone's heartstrings. The treatment process is very complicated and will take at least half a year. Now that we're going to Jiang Kingdom, I'm afraid I won't be able to treat Uncle Chu immediately. Chu Qingyin frowned when she heard this. This was indeed a problem. At this moment, Father Chu stood up and said righteously, "Go ahead if you have urgent matters to attend to. Don't worry about me. I've been sick for 10 years anyway, so I don't need more time." The moment he said that, Chu Qingyin was touched by her father's words. "Daddy, but what came next? That's why you should bring me along." Mr. Chu grinned. Father's words were undoubtedly a huge bomb thrown at Chu Qingyin. "Father, we're not going to play. You know that we have urgent matters to attend to." Chu Qingyin hurriedly pulled him aside and explained. "I know." Father Chu nodded understandingly. Kai, Father can help. You don't know, but I was the one who chased away that bear dog in the cave. Father, it was a black bear. Chu Qingyin couldn't be bothered to correct him, but before she could say anything else, her father had already skipped back to his son-in-law's side. Father Chu circled around his son-in-law. Kai has already agreed to let Father go. You won't dislike Father, right? Father promises that he won't disturb you. Just eat whatever you like. Father, I don't have a big appetite, but don't forget to have a drumstick for lunch and some snacks for dinner. Chu Qingyin blushed with shame. When did she agree? Xiao Su glanced at her, then instructed Mu Ling, prepare another carriage. Father Chu cheered. Chu Qingyin was stunned, and Hua Ling's jaws dropped. Big ice cube, this. Chu Qingyin frowned, unable to understand his decision. Xiao Su patted her hand and urged, "Let's get ready to go." Cheng Yinluo stroked her chin and said, "That's good too. I'll check on Uncle Chu along the way. We'll probably stay for a while in the Jiang Kingdom. We can start the treatment then." When Chu Qingyin heard this, she felt that this was a good idea. Just as Chu Qingyin was about to chase after him, she heard Cheng Yinluo whispering to her when she passed by. "Little girl, I didn't know that your big ice cube was so fond of me." Chu Qingyin paused and turned back to look at her in confusion. She didn't know what Yinluo was trying to say. Cheng Yinluo glanced at her and shrugged. Then, she leisurely walked towards her carriage. Chu Qingyin saw that she didn't answer, and she couldn't figure it out herself, so she gave up and went straight to the carriage. She jumped onto the carriage and lifted the curtains. When she saw the people inside, she felt that she hadn't felt this way for a long time. How long had it been since she and Big Ice Cube rode in the same carriage? Big Ice Cube, your carriage is still the most spacious. She leaned on the couch as if she had no bones, occupying the entire couch. Xiao Su glanced at her. You should stand properly, and you should sit properly. Look at yourself. What a disgrace. It had been a long time since they rode in the same carriage, and he started to nag and preach. This is called lying properly. What can you say when I'm right? Xiao Su retracted his gaze from her and said faintly, "This prince will count to 3. If you don't listen, you'll ride in the same carriage as your father." The moment he said that, Chu Qingyin shuddered. 1. She didn't believe that Big Ice Cube would really do that to her. 2. Forget it. A wise man submits to circumstances. Before the third count came out, she had already obediently sat down and showed Xiao Su her perfect 8 teeth. Xiao Su finally focused his attention on the book. The parenting manual mentioned that children of this age were still growing. If they didn't pay attention to their posture, it would affect their appearance when they grew up. He didn't want the little one he had raised to lose out to others. This carriage was a new type of carriage that Mu Ling had improved based on her previous blueprint. Although it didn't look any different from the carriages on the market, the inside was filled with the best. It was said that there were many mechanisms installed. Once activated, not only could it defend itself, it could also kill enemies. Chu Qingyin couldn't help but admit that Mu Ling was indeed a genius in this field. Big ice cube. How did you cultivate their different abilities in the past? After touching here and there, she had already lost interest. However, she was extremely curious about the origins of these 6 spirits. Everyone has their own specialties. This king only made reasonable training arrangements based on their specialties. Once they've learned enough, they can lead a region on their own. Xiao Su's fingers paused as he flipped through the pages. He recalled that when these people were brought to him, they were only 7 or 8 years old. Now they were all grown up and could take charge of a region on their own. Time flew by, and so many years had passed. Chu Qingyan saw that he was in a daze and guessed that he must be thinking about the past. She asked, Mu Ling is good at designing things, Water Spirit is good at digging for information, Fire Spirit is good at fighting, Turin is good at attacking, Ethereal is good at healing, and there's still Jean Ling? What is he good at? Seeing that the little one's curiosity was aroused, Xiao Su curled his lips. If there's a chance, you will meet him. TSK still keeping me in suspense. Chu Qingyan was a little annoyed. However, it was fun to look forward to it. She was very curious about how Jean Ling looked like. Of the 5 spirits beside her, other than Water Spirit, she had not seen them before. Their appearances were not bad. She was looking forward to seeing Jean Ling's appearance. There were only the 2 of them in the carriage, and he did not speak. Chu Qingyan could not keep her cool and could only take the initiative. She moved in front of him and took the book from his hand. What do you want to do now? Ethereal said that her body had not fully recovered, so she should rest more. He originally thought that if he ignored her, she would be sleepy and go to rest. However, he did not expect her to be so energetic. When his gaze moved from the book to her, Chu Qingyan asked seriously and curiously, I have a question that I don't understand. Why did you agree to go to Jiang country with my parents? You know that time is very precious to you. In order to accommodate my parents, you will definitely delay a lot of your journey. This prince knows what to do. You don't have to worry about it. Xiao Su still avoided her topic. Chu Qingyan was a little depressed. She did not despise her parents for being a burden. She just felt that his decision this time was a little willful. Go to sleep. Xiao Su patted her head. It will take 4 hours before we reach the town. Chu Qingyan saw that she could not get anything out of him, so she simply gave up. Since it had already happened, let it be. She leaned against his knee, found a comfortable position, and started to take an afternoon nap. Xiao Su stroked her long hair, his gaze softening. Little one, after being alone for so long, she wanted to feel what kinship was like. She did not know whether she would live or die after these 3 months, so she did not want to leave any regrets. Chapter 303. What? The King of England is missing? Empress Liang stood up from her chair in shock. Luo Yun immediately stepped forward to appease her. Nyang Nyang, don't be anxious. It's more important to clarify the situation first. His Highness has weathered all these years, so he should be fine. Empress Liang didn't relax because of Luo Yun's words. She turned to look at Gu Rong, who was kneeling on the ground, and asked coldly, What exactly is going on? Tell this consort the truth. Gu Rong didn't dare delay and immediately reported everything that had happened during this period of time. Ever since Yangsha County, our troops have been ambushed and hunted down by bandits. During this time, this subordinate in Gu wrote several letters to the capital, but for some reason, they couldn't be found. Then, Lord discovered our secret movements and sent us away. By the time we returned to our original location, the ground was littered with the corpses of Xiao Lai's cavalry, but Lord's whereabouts were unknown. Our men searched for a long time, but they couldn't find any trace of Lord. Without receiving orders from Her Highness the Empress, this subordinate was worried and returned to the capital alone to report. Gui stayed behind to continue the search. Empress Liang's expression was cold. This consort hasn't received any letters from you these past few days. Gu Rong was shocked. Could it be that you were intercepted along the way? That's the only possibility. Empress Liang's fingers tightly gripped the armrest. She was so angry that veins were popping out on her face. I'm afraid that only that bitch Fu Yu is behind this. Then, Nyang Nyang, what should we do? Should we report this matter to His Majesty? Luo Yun asked worriedly. Empress Liang took a deep breath and suppressed the anger in her heart. She slowly opened her eyes, which were filled with fire. There's no need to tell His Majesty. Gu Rong, tell my father to find Su, no matter what. If he's alive, this consort wants to see him. If he's dead, this consort wants to see his corpse. Yes. Gu Rong turned to leave. Wait. Empress Liang suddenly spoke. Does your highness have any other orders? Gu Rong Fu knelt down again. Tell my father to keep this news a secret. If it spreads like wildfire and the entire capital knows about it, then our Liang family will be finished, Empress Liang said sternly. Understood. After Gu Rong left, the anger in her heart burst out. Empress Liang waved her hand fiercely, and the tea set and vase on the table fell to the ground and broke into pieces. Nyang Nyang, please calm down. Luo Yun stepped forward to support her, while the other palace servants knelt down in fright. This consort hates really hates Empress Liang pushed Luo Yun away and fell back into her chair. His Majesty should have known about such a big matter long ago, but this consort only received the news now. What does this mean? What does it mean? Empress Liang said angrily. Luo Yun comforted her. Perhaps His Majesty was afraid that you would be worried, so he hid this matter for now and told you when he found news of His Highness. Empress Liang laughed coldly. Luo Yun, you actually believe this? He's probably looking forward to squeezing the two of us out of our current positions. She had been married to His Majesty for over 20 years, so she was very clear about his temperament. His favorite thing was to set a trap, then watch as his prey fell into it. Afterwards, he would devour them without them even realizing it. By the time they realized, it was already too late. Luo Yun's expression was bitter. Nyang Nyang, the most important thing right now is to find His Highness. That's right. If anything happens to Su, the entire Liang family will be finished. Empress Liang closed her eyes, then ordered, send someone to pay close attention to that bitch Fu Yue. If there's any movement, immediately report to this consort. Yes. After Luo Yun agreed, she advised again, Nyang Nyang, don't worry. His Highness is blessed by the heavens. Didn't Gu Rong say that she didn't find Huoling and the others? That means that they're with His Highness. His Highness has been outside for so many years and has gone through so many disasters. It's likely that he'll be able to turn danger into safety this time. On the other hand, if your body is damaged from anger, what will you do? Empress Liang waved her hand. You don't need to comfort this consort. This consort sees it clearer than anyone else. Luo Yun wanted to say something else, but was stopped by a look from Empress Liang. Empress Liang stood up, her eyes red and filled with hostility. If anything happens to Su this time, then this consort will drag that bitch Fu Yue and her son to the grave, even if this consort has to sacrifice everything in the Liang family. Once she lost Su, her position in the Eastern Palace would change hands. The position of Crown Prince would be Xiao Ran, and the Liang family's decades of foundation would be destroyed overnight. She definitely wouldn't allow this to happen. Luo Yun, this consort wants to see His Majesty. Her slightly narrowed eyes abruptly opened. She disdained to compromise, but for the Liang family, for Su, she had to take a gamble. Although she didn't understand why her master suddenly changed her mind, Luo Yun immediately went to prepare. Inside the Imperial Garden, Sichuan Emperor sat in the cloud-gazing pavilion with his eyes closed, listening to a performer playing the guzheng. Your Majesty, Her Highness the Empress requests an audience. Eunuch Xiao stepped forward to report. The hand that was lightly tapping on the table paused, then Sichuan Emperor slowly opened his eyes. A slightly complicated expression flashed through his already cloudy eyes. Has anyone seen the Empress today? Hearing this, Eunuch Xiao had another guard step forward. It was the petty officer in charge of entering and exiting the palace gates. The petty officer said, Your Majesty, an hour ago, a guard holding Her Highness the Empress token entered Chaoyang Palace. He has already left the palace. A trace of understanding appeared on Sichuan Emperor's face. He ordered, Summon the Empress. Yes. Eunuch Xiao turned and announced loudly, Summon Her Highness the Empress for an audience. A moment later, a beautiful figure slowly walked over. "This consort greets your majesty. May your majesty be in good health." Before Emperor Liang arrived, she had specially dressed herself. At this moment, she slightly lowered her head, revealing a white jade neck. Her swaying long skirt covered the ground, and the aqua blue color was even more gentle, wiping away her usual unyielding nature. The double outline of the crescent moon rubbed in a bit of tenderness. Her lips were covered with rouge, full of words, revealing her white teeth. Sweeping away her previous unyielding nature, she was now tender and affectionate, with a different style. "Beloved consort, please rise." Accustomed to her coldness for many years, seeing her today, the Sichuan emperor seemed to see her 20 years ago. When they first met on the river, she looked back and smiled, unable to restrain her joy. "Thank you, your majesty." Empress Liang obediently got up and walked to the table. She poured a cup of wine for Sichuan emperor and said with a smile, "Your majesty is in such a refined mood today. How can you enjoy the zither without pastries?" Empress Liang finished speaking and raised her hand. Luo Yun, who was behind her, brought a delicate rose cake and placed it on the table. "The empress is considerate." Sichuan emperor reached out and patted her soft hand. His woman was willing to put down her status to please him. It was enough to satisfy a man's chauvinistic mentality. "What is your majesty saying? This is what this consort ought to do." Empress Liang smiled softly. Seeing the light that flashed through Sichuan emperor's eyes, she knew that he was moved. "Your majesty, tonight, your majesty, this consort came late. It turns out that sister empress is also here." A voice interrupted Empress Liang's words. Chapter 304. These words separated Empress Liang from the Sichuan emperor. Imperial concubine Moon leisurely walked over. She wore a light yellow dress that trailed behind her. With every step she took, her dress swayed, making it seem as if flowers were blooming around her feet. Her makeup was elegant and refined, contrasting with the cold and withered leaves outside. Looking at her was like seeing tree branches sprouting in spring, making one feel happy. Empress Liang narrowed her eyes. She was very displeased to see this Cheng Yaojin suddenly appear out of nowhere. But at this time, she had to force a smile in response. "So it's consort you, Mimi. It's so cold and Mimi's body is thin and weak. It's best if you don't come out in the wind." "Many thanks for big sister empress concern. Mimi hasn't reached the point where I can be blown away by the wind. But big sister, don't you feel cold in your clothes today?" Consort you covered her mouth with a handkerchief and smiled gently. Her tone was 70% concerned and 30% worried. Empress Liang's expression changed. Her clothes were indeed a bit thin, but in order to attract His Majesty's attention, she was willing to risk it all and couldn't care less. However, Consort Yu's insinuations made Sichuan Emperor frown slightly. He suddenly felt that the Empress' breathtaking aura lessened a bit. He granted the two a seat. Empress Liang and Consort Yu sat on the left and right of the Empress Dowager. At this time, Sichuan Emperor rubbed Consort Yu's hand and suddenly reprimanded. "How do you servants serve people? Don't you see that your master's hands are so cold? Hurry and bring up the hand warmer." The palace maid serving imperial concubine Yu immediately went to fetch a hand stove. Seeing this, imperial concubine Yu cast a provocative look at Empress Liang, then said tenderly to the West Xian Emperor, "Your Majesty, there's no need. Don't you want to go sit in Chinchie's palace later? It's the same if you go back and warm my hands." Empress Liang was originally annoyed by Consort Yu's provocation, but hearing her words, it was obvious that His Majesty was going to sleep in her palace tonight. Her heart instantly chilled. "It'll take some time to walk from here to your palace. Take care of yourself first," Sichuan Emperor said considerately. At this time, the hand warmer prepared by the palace servants arrived. Sichuan Emperor stood up. "There's no need to wait. Let's go to your palace now." Imperial concubine Moon's face was filled with joy, but when she saw Empress Liang, she hesitated for a moment. Then she smiled and said, big sister Empress. His Majesty is going to little sister's palace to admire the plum blossoms. Do you want to come along? Empress Liang looked at this hypocritical consort Yu and felt angry, but she couldn't show it. She said with a smile, "It's such a beautiful day. Big sister won't disturb His Majesty and younger sister from admiring the plum blossoms. Your Majesty, this consort will take her leave." "That's good. Go back early and warm up. Don't catch a cold," Sichuan Emperor said with concern, but his gaze quickly shifted to Consort Yu. Empress Liang lowered her head and acknowledged. The three of them left Cloud Viewing Pavilion together, but in opposite directions. After walking a few steps, Empress Liang faintly heard a conversation behind her. "Your Majesty, does Big Sister Empress still dislike this consort? This consort has already tried her best to please her. But why does she still reject this consort?" Consort Yu spoke with grievance, like a young girl acting coquettishly to her lover. "You've already done very well," Sichuan Emperor replied with a smile. Then a burst of lovey-dovey laughter came from afar. Empress Liang felt as if all the strength in her body had been sucked out. She held onto the railing with one hand. The icy cold touched her fingertips, but she didn't feel it at all. She and Consort Yu had fought for almost half of their lives, but she always lost because she didn't know how to scheme enough. She was too headstrong and always lost too miserably. "Nyang Nyang," Luo Yun revealed a worried expression. Empress Liang stood up straight and regained her usual grace and elegance. No matter when, she had to shine brilliantly and not be easily trampled on. She could only place her hopes on Father for Su Er's matter. She hoped that he would be able to make it in time. "Help me back to the palace." "Yes." Her thin figure shivered slightly in the cold wind, but it couldn't change her straight back. Everything that had happened in the past had become a touch of sadness in the cold wind. Who was a romantic? It was all for the love of the wind and the moon. Taking advantage of this helpless day, sad day, and lonely time to test the stupidity. In the cold wind, Chu Qingyin and the others disguised themselves as peddlers and settled down in a town. Ethereal had disguised Xiao Su's appearance as an ordinary person. If Chu Qingyin didn't recognize that pair of eyes, she would have thought that it was someone else. "Ethereal, Ethereal, you've turned His Highness into a passerby. Do you want to do the same for me?" Chu Qingyin asked excitedly. She also wanted to experience the taste of disguising herself. Xiao Su glanced at her. "No need. You look very safe." "Look very safe?" Chu Qingyin felt as if a basin of cold water had been poured over her head. "Big ice cube. What do you mean?" Chu Qingyin tugged at his sleeve, vowing that he would give her an explanation. "What I mean," Xiao Su said as he pried her hand away. "Pulling and pulling in public. Where are your manners?" "Big ice cube. You're so pedantic." Chu Qingyin wanted to cry, but had no tears. Since when did the ice cube's words become so sharp? Seeing that her mistress had entered the shop first, Ethereal smiled and said to her, "His Highness used to be a man of few words. Once he's willing to take the initiative to talk to someone, it means that he's in a good mood." Chu Qingyin pursed her lips. Even if he was in a good mood, there was no need to build it on other people's pain. Also, why did Ethereal's tone give her the feeling that she was taking pleasure in other people's misfortune? Chung Yinluo walked over and patted her on the shoulder. "I couldn't tell. Your ice cube is usually quiet, but when he does, it's shocking." With that, Chung Yinluo walked forward. Ethereal wanted to take her bundle, but she dodged and left with a cold snort. Mr. Chu, who had caught up with them, placed the toy in Ethereal's hand before she could retract it. Ignoring Ethereal's twitching eyes, he nagged, "This is something Blockhead made for me on the way here. Don't touch it. Thanks for your hard work, Hollow." With that, he entered the shop with Mrs. Chu. Ethereal looked at the messy bundle in her hand and realized in hindsight. What the hell was Hollow? Chu Qingyin's eyes curved. This was karma. "Thanks for your hard work, Hollow." Chu Qingyin strode into the inn. During dinner, Chu Qingyin's group did not attract much attention from the others. That was because they were more or less disguised, and they looked like ordinary merchants. Chu Qingyin waited impatiently for the food to be served. She had slept in the carriage for the whole afternoon. When she woke up, She was already hungry. Didn't they say that exercise would make one hungry faster? Why did sleeping consume so much energy? Just then, a sumptuous spread of dishes arrived. Chu Qingyin grabbed her chopsticks and was about to pick up the braised pork when a pair of chopsticks stopped her midway. The pair of chopsticks then moved to the stir-fried shredded carrots on the side. Big ice cube, I don't want that. I want to eat meat. Chu Qingyin frowned. Eat more carrots. They'll help you grow taller. Xiao Su saw her withdraw her chopsticks and put some carrots into her bowl. My height. Before Chu Qingyin could retort, Xiao Su had already cut her off. When I was your age, I was already as tall as Miss Cheng. What the hell? How could a boy and a girl be compared in terms of height? Chu Qingyin was speechless. Cheng Yinluo, who was chewing on a pig's trotter, widened her eyes. How did a bystander like her get implicated? Chapter 305. Ever since that dinner, there were carrots in every meal. No matter how much Chu Qingyin protested, it was all to no avail. She had no choice but to swallow the vegetables that she didn't like to eat but were essential for growing up. She felt that it was too painful for a person to experience growth twice in their life. They traveled for 3 days and 3 nights in a row and found an inn to stay before dark. Perhaps it was because they were successfully modified, but they weren't attacked along the way. It could be said that there were no surprises or dangers. After dinner, Chu Qingyin followed Xiao Su into his room. What's the matter? Along the way, he saw that she looked like she wanted to say something, but stopped. He didn't ask her, thinking that she would tell him sooner or later, but she didn't say anything until after dinner. Xiao Su sat down on the chair and looked up at her. Chu Qingyin sat down in front of him and rested her chin on her hands. She looked troubled. Big ice block, we've already reached the border of Sichuan. After crossing the border and passing through Junlan, we'll reach Jiang. Xiao Su answered casually. I've asked the Earth Spirit. He said that if we take a shortcut, we can go from the Junlan state to the Jiang state very quickly. It'll take at least half a month. I'm thinking about how we should get the ice crystal flower. I have no idea now. She rubbed her head, very distressed. So this little fellow was troubled about this matter. Xiao Su didn't look as troubled as her. He said calmly, let nature take its course. You don't have to think too much. But there's still no news of the love grass. I can't calm down. She leaned on the table and buried her head between her elbows. As soon as she finished speaking, she felt her head sink. She looked up from her arms and saw a big ice block gently stroking her head. She was a little touched. Big ice block, don't think too much at such a young age. If the things in your head are too heavy, you won't be able to grow tall. He retracted his hand and looked at her worriedly. What did this have to do with height? Big ice block, you're adding insult to injury again. Thus, Chu Qingyin entered the room with a heart full of bitterness, and then left the room with a body full of displeasure. Xiao Su looked at the door that was slammed shut. His lips curled slightly as he tapped his fingers on the table. After a moment, he said, Come in. Huling and Turin answered and opened the door. Greetings, master. Well, what happened recently? Xiao Su leaned against the back of the chair with a lazy expression. It was obvious that he was in a good mood. Huling said, Master, Gu Rong has returned to the capital. After the Empress received the news of your disappearance, she sent a message to the Liang family to find you at all costs. They should have already set off by now. Aside from the local officials that His Majesty has sent to search for you, there are at least 3 other forces looking for you. One of them is the Moon Palace. But last time, the young princess ordered this subordinate to shift the attention of the local officials to those bandits and successfully held them back. That's why our trip this time was more daunting than dangerous. He already knew about the little fellow's previous orders. It was indeed a good move to return an eye for an eye. Continue to hide your whereabouts. Don't let anyone find out, whether it's those assassins, the Imperial Palace, or the Liang family. Xiao Su said calmly, Master, don't you plan to let the Empress know that you're safe? Huling was a bit confused. Not for now, Xiao Su calmly replied. His expression was calm, and no one could tell what he was thinking. Huling did not ask any more questions. Turin stepped forward and reported, Master, Water Spirits sent news today. There's still no news of the love grass, but she has already expanded the search area to several large countries in the surrounding area. Well, there's an underground trading city in Sichuan. Send some people to infiltrate and scout for information. The underground city was mixed with mermaids and people, but it was also the best place to scout for information. This was because there were people of all levels of various countries. It was the most secretive place to eat, drink, whore, and gamble. It was the most mysterious place. Many rare treasures on the market could be seen everywhere inside. I'll write a letter to Water Spirit later. Turin agreed. Pulling continued. By the way, Master, the customs documents to enter Junlan have been completed. Once we enter the border, we can contact the people scattered in Junlan. Well, we're just passing through. There's no need to disturb others. Xiao Su nodded. He never had to intervene in these matters. Huling and the others would take care of it themselves. The others that their master mentioned did not need to be mentioned. They knew that it was the imperial family of Junlan. Yes, Junlan, long time no see. Xiao Su looked out the window. The night was dark and the cold wind whistled, but his eyes were calm. As soon as they returned to the room, Chu Qingyan was shocked to see that there was an extra person in the room. She patted her chest to calm her breath and said angrily, "Mother, why didn't you say anything? I thought a thief had entered." The fear of the assassination a few days ago had almost become a conditioned reflex. Mother Chu smiled and said, "I've never seen you so timid before. Things are different now." Chu Qingyan walked straight to the table and poured a glass of water for her mother. Then she poured a glass for herself. After taking a sip, Chu Qingyan asked curiously, "Mother, why aren't you resting at this late hour? Why are you looking for me? Aren't you also not resting at this late hour? You're running around." Mother Chu raised her hand and tapped her nose gently, shaking her head with a smile. "I'm going to His Highness's room, not somewhere else to play. Your daughter has grown up. Don't worry," Chu Qingyan said with a smile. Mother Chu's heart skipped a beat when she heard her daughter say that. She was worried because her daughter had grown up, especially when she heard that she was going to the King of England's room at this late hour. She hesitated for a moment before saying, "Kai, Mother wants to ask you. What do you think of His Royal Highness's character?" Chu Qingyan answered without hesitation. "He's elegant, handsome, distinguished right from wrong, selfless, respected the elderly and cherished the young." Before she could finish, Mother Chu interrupted her with a smile. "You silly girl, why are you getting more and more ridiculous? Mother is asking you a serious question, not a joke." Chu Qingyan put down the glass and reached out to hug her mother. She smiled innocently. "Mother, why are you suddenly asking me this question? I'm afraid that you'll be wronged." Along the way, His Royal Highness was not warm to others, and he was not warm enough to Kai either. If this continued, she was afraid that Kai would not receive the same response. Although it was normal for men to have multiple wives and concubines in the secular world, she also hoped that her daughter could be treated like a treasure by a man like Yuan. Perhaps it was because she had met Yuan in this life, who cared for her like a treasure. "I won't be wronged. Actually, when you're not around, His Highness treats me very well. I feel that he's like a big brother who always tolerates me," Chu Qingyan said with a smile. Hearing this, Mother Chu could not help but think that she might be overthinking. Kai was still young and did not know what love was. In fact, Mother Chu was wrong. It was not that Kai did not know, but that she did not think of herself. What was love? It was just two people going through all kinds of ups and downs, supporting each other, and slowly learning to help each other in times of need. Chapter 306. Everyone set off early in the morning. As time went by, it was already December. Mr. Chu was wrapped up like a bear in a cotton-padded jacket. "Dan Yang, I'm not cold. Why do you have to make me wear so much?" Mr. Chu grumbled as he tugged at his clothes. "You're not cold now because you're wearing so much. If you take it off, you'll be cold." Mrs. Chu took him by the hand and got into the carriage with a smile. Mr. Chu felt that his wife was right, so he stopped fussing about his clothes and climbed into the carriage clumsily. Chu Qingyan felt warm when she saw how her parents interacted with each other. "Your father is lucky. At least he only became like a child after his head injury. He didn't become demented and couldn't take care of himself. I've seen many patients who became paralyzed or couldn't take care of themselves because of serious injuries. They became a burden to their families, and the whole family suffered. Cheng Yinluo stood beside her and followed her line of sight. She smiled and sighed with emotion. Chu Qingyin nodded. Thank the heavens for their kindness. No, it must be because your father was strong-willed when he fell into a coma. He didn't allow himself to sink into depravity. That's why he managed to retain a little consciousness. Otherwise, with his injuries, it would have been a problem for him to survive. She had done a thorough examination of Mr. Chu's head injury during her free time. The results shocked her. When she found out that Mr. Chu was a brave and skilled general, her surprise turned into admiration. Chu Qingyan pursed her lips. She knew that her father, who was at the front line, had just received the news that her mother had given birth to her. He wanted to ask for leave to return home, but the war suddenly broke out, and he had to stay behind to fight. At that time, he missed her mother dearly and had high hopes for her. How could he bear to leave? Actually, I've already made up my mind. Whether Dad recovers or not, I'll take care of him for the rest of his life. Chu Qingyan's eyes curved into crescents, and her smile was warmer than ever. Cheng Yinluo reached out to stroke the little girl's head. Not long after she put down her hand, she heard a cold voice. It's time to get in the carriage. Chu Qingyan replied with a smile. Coming? Then she looked up at Cheng Yinluo and said, Let's go. Cheng Yinluo retracted her hand from the little lass's body. She could faintly feel that Xiao Su's gaze was so cold that her fingers were almost frozen stiff. TSK, it was just a pat on the head. How petty! Cheng Yinluo grumbled inwardly. Then, she slowly made her way to her carriage, looking straight ahead as she walked past Ethereal. In the carriage, Chu Qingyan looked at the thick stack of books on the table and felt that her vision was blurry. This... She was so nervous that she couldn't finish her sentence. It's exactly what you think. Xiao Su didn't even look at her. Chu Qingyan still wanted to make a final struggle. Big ice cube, it's not good to read in the car. Once the car bumps, it will damage your vision. Are you doubting the wood spirit's craftsmanship? Xiao Su calmly replied. Chu Qingyan glanced at the carriage. She couldn't seem to go against her conscience and say that the carriage was bumpy. However, she was just saying it for show. She wouldn't reject any study that Big Ice Cube arranged for her. But once she flipped open the book, she was already dumbfounded. Big Ice Cube. How do you pronounce this word? Xiao Su face-bombed and reached out to take the book. Which word? She pointed at it modestly. This. Boom, it means rumble in this world. Chu Qingyan instantly felt her brain explode. It was just a simplified Chinese character. She couldn't read it after changing her clothes. No, she wasn't someone who would back down in the face of difficulties. Little guy, don't think that I won't recognize you just because you're wearing a vest. Chu Qingyan immediately picked up the book and started to gnaw on it. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw the little fellow's rare, serious expression. Only then did Xiao Su retract his thoughts from her. He hoped that she wouldn't fall asleep while reading like she did in the past. It had to be said that Xiao Su understood Chu Qingyan very well. It didn't take long for her to fall asleep. She had studied hard for 12 years to get into university, so she never picked up a book so seriously. She pinched her face and forced herself to wake up. She had already decided to work hard, so she wouldn't give up so easily. In her heart, there were still many things that she wanted to do. If she couldn't even take this first step, then how would she walk the rest of her path? Very quickly, she regained her concentration. However, this time, she brought out the same undying spirit that she had when she was preparing for the college entrance examination. Xiao Su originally thought that she would quickly act spoiled and beg for mercy. At least, that was what he thought before she kept nodding her head. But not long after, she seemed to be filled with fighting spirit. The only thing missing was the words, "I'm serious, don't disturb me," written all over her face. He smiled. It seemed that this little fellow had really made up her mind. Although he didn't know why she suddenly changed her mind, the result was always good. After watching for an hour, Chu Qingyan leaned against the wall of the carriage and let her eyes rest. She turned her head and saw that Big Ice Block was resting on the couch with one hand supporting his face. with the warm sunset shining in. Chu Qingyan felt that this scene was very pleasing to the eye. Although he wasn't wearing a mask and had disguised himself as an ordinary person, there were some natural things that wouldn't change based on one's appearance. A person with outstanding temperament, no matter what they did, would still be noble and handsome. Chu Qingyan couldn't help but spread her hands on the couch and put her chin on them as she seriously looked at him. Because of this injury, most of Big Ice Block's martial arts were damaged. Before the poison was cured, he couldn't use his internal energy. His body wasn't as good as before, so the clothes she prepared for him this time were much thicker than before. For example, the black brocade robe he was wearing today was filled with warm rabbit fur. Around his neck was a circle of snow-white fox fur. Even his boots were padded with thick soles. Although his clothes were a little thick, they couldn't hide his slender and elegant figure. Thinking back to the time when she gave him the medicinal bath, his figure was quite standard. It seemed that some people, when wearing clothes, had an unimaginable figure that made people want to vomit blood. And Big Ice Block was such a type. When he wore clothes, he exuded an ascetic aura, but when he took off his clothes, he exuded an evil charm. Perhaps feeling Chu Qingyan's gaze, Xiao Su slowly opened his eyes. "Have you finished reading the book?" His clear eyes were cleaner than the washed sky. Chu Qingyan silently cursed in her heart. So Big Ice Block wasn't asleep and was caught peeping. "Yes, I've finished reading. Do you want to test me?" Chu Qingyan asked provocatively. "Seeing that you're so confident, there's no need." Xiao Su's eyes revealed a trace of a smile. Chu Qingyan pursed her lips. It was rare that she was willing to cooperate, but he wasn't willing. "All right, Big Ice Block, I have a question for you. You have to answer it with your heart." Chapter 307. Oh! Xiao Su raised his brows as he looked at her. He didn't know what this little fellow was up to this time. What kind of attitude was this? "Don't be perfunctory," Chu Qingyan emphasized again. Xiao Su changed into a more comfortable position and looked at her calmly. "Ask away." He thought that the little fellow would ask what they were going to eat tonight, or why people eat the radish that rabbits eat. He also asked her why the Earth Spirit always had a straight face. This was because she had always asked him these questions in the past. But when the little fellow asked in such a serious manner, he couldn't help but be surprised. "Big Ice Cube, if I had a magic lamp that could fulfill your wish, what would you ask for?" "Magic lamp?" The little fellow said something he had never heard before. "Wish." Xiao Su was slightly confused. Chu Qingyan nodded vigorously. "That's right. It's something that you usually want, but can't get all of a sudden, but you really want it." I refused to answer such a non-existent hypothesis. Ever since he disguised himself, Xiao Su no longer referred to himself as this prince. "No, just treat it as a hypothesis. Hurry up and answer." Chu Qingyan leaned over and continued to encourage him. Xiao Su had no choice but to say casually, "Then I'll let you grow up quickly. That way, this prince won't have to worry about you." Chu Qingyan rolled her eyes when she heard this. He said it so reluctantly. "No, you promised me that you would answer properly." Chu Qingyan jumped onto his bed and pushed his arm, looking like she wouldn't give up if he didn't answer. Xiao Su grabbed her waving hands with one hand and leaned closer to her curiously. "Is this question very important?" Chu Qingyan didn't notice how ambiguous their position was at this time. She was completely focused on him not cooperating. "Of course it's important. This is related to..." At this point, Chu Qingyan suddenly stopped. Oh no, she had almost blurted it out. "What does it have to do with?" Xiao Su raised his eyebrows. He had a feeling that the little fellow was hiding something from him. Sensing Big Ice Cube's suspicious gaze, Chu Qingyan immediately sat up straight and broke free from his grasp. She said angrily, "I don't care. Are you going to tell me or not?" He did not like to force people. If the little girl wanted to make a fuss, then let her. Seeing that he was ignoring her, Chu Qingyan was a little distressed. This person was unmoved by force or persuasion. How was she going to get information out of him? Suddenly, she had a flash of inspiration. She turned around and chuckled at him. "Big Ice Cube, I remember that you owed me something before. Then, when I was unconscious a few days ago, you also said that you would promise me something. Do you still remember? Don't go back on your words." When Xiao Su heard this, he felt a little funny. He thought that she was unconscious and didn't hear it. He didn't expect her to secretly remember it. A gentleman's promise is worth 1,000 pieces of gold. He already knew what she was going to do. Okay, then I'll sacrifice a condition in exchange for your answer, Chu Qingyin said proudly. In this world, what you want won't be too expensive. It can be found, but it won't be too ordinary. It would be best if it was within her ability. There's nothing I want. Xiao Su looked at her, his gaze a little erratic. Basically, he didn't want too much. Identity, status, fame, and fortune. Chu Qingyin was shocked. Are you serious? Xiao Su came back to his senses and looked at her. His eyes were deep black. It could be seen that he was telling the truth. Chu Qingyin's face fell. A good condition in exchange for this answer. I'm losing out. When Xiao Su heard her complaint, he found it funny. The bitterness in his heart disappeared in a flash. He thought for a moment and said, if you tell me your purpose for asking this question, I'll give you another condition. How about it? When she heard this, she was a little tempted, but she rejected the idea in her heart. I don't have a purpose. Xiao Su heard this and closed his eyes to rest. Then there's no condition. Chu Qingyin sighed deeply. She watched as 2 conditions slipped away. There was only one left. It seemed like she had to use it sparingly in the future. But the big ice cube said that he didn't want anything, which gave her a bigger headache. She knew that the big ice cube's birthday was coming soon. It would be in half a month, but she didn't know what to give him. On her birthday, he had given her a star tower and a star. She didn't want to casually prepare a gift for him. She felt that this problem was more difficult than the mathematical Olympiad. Xiao Su heard her sigh. Although he was curious, he knew that she would say it sooner or later, so he didn't take it to heart. It was just that the words at that time were used as a joke by him many years later. Inside the red veil, there was a fragrant and soft woman. He lifted the chin of the person below him. His eyes seemed to hide thousands of stars, so bright that people didn't dare to look at them. His voice was ambiguous as he said playfully, say, if my wish could be realized back then, wouldn't I have to wait until today? She bit her pearly white teeth and pursed her red lips. The color of red wine spread on her snow-white skin. Pervert, so my wife still has the strength to scold people? Their voices became lower and lower, turning into a lingering fragrance between their lips and teeth. The night was dark. This time, there was no village or shop, so they could only spend the night in the wilderness. Turin walked to his master and reported, after another 2 days of walking, we will reach the border between Sichuan and Junlan. Xiao Su nodded. Go and make the arrangements. Yes. Big Ice Cube. Is Junlan rich in clivia, so it got this name? Chu Qingyin heard their conversation and couldn't help but ask. No, my little ancestor. You mustn't think like that. Although the name Junlan sounds nice, the people inside Chi, they're called crafty and unreasonable. Hualing immediately jumped up to correct her when he heard this. Chu Qingyin was even more curious. You've been to Junlan? You've interacted with them? Hualing was instantly silenced by his little princess consort's question. Should he say it or not? Are you hiding something from me? Chu Qingyin revealed a faint smile. Say it. How are they crafty and unreasonable? Or are you jealous that they have more temperament than you? So you're smearing their reputation? Father Chu also jumped out at this time, looking like he was going to tickle them if they didn't say it. Hualing felt that he was really asking for trouble with his loose lips, so he immediately looked at Turin and the others. Unfortunately, they only gave him a look that said, "You're asking for trouble." Then they turned around and avoided his call for help. This subordinate suddenly remembered that there are many things to do, so I'll leave first. Hualing ran away like a wisp of smoke. Originally, Chu Qingyin had only wanted to tease him out of boredom. However, she did not expect him to be so hesitant to speak. This piqued her interest even more. What's more, she had noticed that Big Ice Cube was looking at the fire spirit with a pressuring gaze. Could it have something to do with Big Ice Cube? However, they were just passing by Junlan in a hurry this time. They would probably have to wait until they came back before they had time to tour Junlan. But what Chu Qingyin didn't know was that plans often couldn't keep up with changes. Chapter 308. Is there any unspeakable secret in Junlan? Chung Yinluo leaned closer to her and poked her arm. There was a hint of curiosity in her voice. Chu Qingyin shrugged. I don't know either. Why don't you ask your senior? Maybe he knows. After hearing Chu Qingyin's suggestion, Chung Yinluo snorted. Forget it. I don't want to talk to him. Along the way, this pair of enemies could be said to be one chasing and the other ignoring. Chu Qingyin thought that if this continued, Ethereal would be heartbroken. Thus, she couldn't help but say, Sister Yinluo, I think I saw Ethereal's hand injured today. I don't know if it was cut when he was picking herbs. Why are you telling me this? Chung Yinluo was stunned at first. Then, she glared fiercely at Chu Qingyin. Why are you so fierce? I just wanted to ask if you have any ointment. I'll give it to him. Chu Qingyin was secretly holding back her laughter, but she didn't dare to show it on her face. Chung Yinluo knew that she was in the wrong. She coughed softly and tried to cover it up. I don't have any ointment. Even if I did, I wouldn't give it to him. Chu Qingyin looked at Chung Yinluo, who was about to leave angrily. She couldn't help but chuckle. This person with a sharp tongue, but a soft heart, was definitely going to get some ointment for Ethereal. At this moment, a big head came over. Chu Qingyin met the blinking eyes and immediately took a few steps back in fear. Father, don't you know that sometimes people can be scared to death? Chu Qingyin patted her chest. She wanted to cry, but had no tears. I didn't scare you. You didn't hear me when I called you. Mr. Chu felt wronged. You called me just now? Why didn't I hear you? Chu Qingyin quickly comforted her childish father. Yes, if you don't believe me, I'll meow a few more times for you. In order to prove his innocence, Mr. Chu coughed and closed his eyes. Meow, meow. Chu Qingyin was still looking forward to it at first, but after hearing it, her whole face froze. No wonder she was a little suspicious just now. When did a stray cat sneak into their side? Now she finally found the source. She patted her face. As expected, she couldn't expect too much from her father. Dad. Chu Qingyin grabbed her father's hand and almost covered her face. Don't shout. I'm here. Look, you're the one who didn't hear it. You can't blame me. Chu Machen's father flipped over like a surf singing a song. Chu Qingyin quickly said, Yes. Aha. By the way, Kai, what did you say to little Yama just now? He asked curiously. Chu Qingyin scratched her head. Actually, you're not allowed to lie to me. Children who lie have rotten tongues. Chu Machen's father said seriously. Chu Qingyin sighed. It's like this. Ethereal and Sister Yinluo are fellow apprentices, and they have a good relationship. However, when Ethereal left the sect a few years ago, he had some disagreements with Sister Yinluo. As a result, they don't have any contact with each other. I just wanted to take the opportunity to bring them together. As doctors, if they are happy, I think His Highness's injury and your illness will recover faster. Perhaps they would be happy and have a flash of inspiration. Then, they wouldn't have to travel thousands of miles to find these strange herbs. Kai, what you said makes sense. Should I go and help them? Chu Machen's father rolled up his sleeves, looking like he was about to make a bold and decisive decision. Chu Qingyin hurriedly helped him pull up his sleeves. Dad, you should just watch from the sidelines. Don't get involved. Although Chu Machen's father didn't agree, he still felt that the reason the two of them hadn't reconciled was because he hadn't helped them. Therefore, he already had a plan in mind. If Chu Qingyin knew what her father was planning, she would definitely pray to the heavens to bless this quarrelsome couple. By the way, I think the young man you've taken in is not bad, Chu Machen's father commented. Chu Qingyin raised her chin and said without much pride, That's right. Look at who took him in. He has good looks and martial arts skills. He's not inferior to anyone in any way. Chu Machen's father smiled. Not bad. I think Xining is not bad either. Of course, Xining is well-behaved and obedient. She's clever and skillful. She can be said to be my right-hand woman. Chu Qingyin followed her father's words and praised her. Then let's make them a couple. They're a match made in heaven. Chu Machen's father clapped his hands in approval. Chu Qingyin's jaw dropped in shock. Dad, you're just randomly matching a couple. This was too unreliable. Isn't this a good idea? I think the two of them look like husband and wife. Chu Machen's father rubbed his chin and said confidently. Chu Qingyin's mouth twitched. If Imperial Grandfather was here, he would definitely have a lot to talk about with her father. They would talk about how a quack was made. Dad, Xining and Jean Xin are still so young. They can't tell. Chu Qingyin felt that she couldn't let her father continue like this. Otherwise, the whole team would fall apart. Chu Machen's father's face stiffened. Aren't you still young? You picked up a bunch of scallions and brought them home to be your son-in-law. That's why you don't know that a lot of people nowadays have to be groomed from a young age. It's the same for couples. In any case, you'll be together in the future. Why don't you nurture them in advance? This way, your days of loving each other will be extended for a few more years. Chu Qingyin's head hurt from her father's nonsense. Although it made sense after listening carefully, Chu Qingyin endured the sweat on her forehead and advised, Dad, let's put this matter aside for now. If the two of them like each other in a few years, I'll make the decision for them. Chu Machen's father winked proudly. He would put this matter aside for now. When he remembered, he would matchmake them. Why was he so busy? At this moment, Chu Machen's father suddenly remembered something important. Kai, isn't it our son-in-law's birthday in a few days? As soon as he said this, Chu Qingyin immediately shushed him. Dad, lower your voice. Otherwise, you won't be able to give His Highness a surprise. Oh, right. It must be a surprise. What gift should Dad prepare? Chu Machen's father was delighted and began to ponder hard. It's fine. As long as it can express your feelings, it's fine. Chu Qingyin said with a smile. Then Dad will go back and have a good discussion with your mother. Chu Machen's father turned to leave, his mouth still muttering. I don't know how to make clothes, I don't know how to carve things, I don't know how to dance. Why am I so stupid? Seeing her father's back figure dilly-dallying, Chu Qingyin let out a sigh of relief. With this matter to deal with, her father would be able to put aside a lot of his thoughts and wouldn't harm others. Unfortunately, the results were relative. Jean Xin was playing with his weapon when someone appeared beside him. He looked at the shadow on the ground and saw that it was Hualing. Master is looking for you. He's waiting for you in the forest in front. Chapter 309. Jean Xin put away the sword in his hand. Although he was puzzled as to why the King of England was looking for him, he remembered that when he first became his master subordinate, he was also looked for by the King of England once. He had a guess in his heart that it should have something to do with his master. As soon as he arrived at the forest, he saw the person who was facing him. Although his appearance was ordinary and this common face couldn't be found even if it was submerged in the crowd, but the way he stood there in contemplation made people unable to move their eyes away. He sighed in his heart. Some people were born noble. Even if they wore coarse linen clothes, they were still outstanding. Some people were born coarse. Even if they wore brocade clothes, it couldn't hide their original nature. You're here. Hearing the sound, Xiao Su didn't turn around. He looked forward and said in a gentle voice, Yes, I don't know why the eldest young master is looking for Jean Xin. In the outside world, Xiao Su was the eldest young master, and Chu Qingyin was the youngest young master. I saw that you have been practicing swordsmanship recently. How is it going? Xiao Su asked. Jean Xin was slightly surprised. He didn't expect the King of England to know that he had been practicing martial arts in his free time. He thought that the King of England only cared about business and his master. No, he forgot. In fact, the King of England paid attention to him because he was concerned about his master's potential performance. Recently, Jean Xin has been practicing martial arts in his free time, but his aptitude is not good. There are some moves that I don't understand. The memories in my mind are fragmented, and even the moves are mixed up. Jean Xin didn't hide anything and reported truthfully. In fact, he had been puzzled for a long time. But recently, Hualing and the others seemed to be very busy. He didn't want to disturb them and could only guess blindly. Moreover, he was injured before, so he was more or less affected. After listening to Jean Xion's words, Xiao Su nodded. You don't have to keep practicing according to the moves in your memory. Sometimes you can only use the body's reaction to make a smooth move. Most of the moves that catch the opponent off guard come from following your heart's desire. Jean Xin was a little surprised. Was the King of England giving him pointers? These words seemed to be very beneficial to him. This is a sword manual. If you're interested, take it and practice. Xiao Su slowly turned around and handed the book in his hand to him. Jean Xin was flattered. He hesitated for a moment before reaching out to take the book. Why do you want to guide Jean Xin? He didn't believe that there was such a thing as a free lunch in this world, so he mustered up his courage and asked, "Your mistress is still young, and her ability to protect herself is still lacking. Therefore, she needs you to assist her." Xiao Su paused his steps. After he finished speaking, he walked towards the little fellow in the bonfire, who was smiling like a flower. Jean Xin understood. Sure enough, it was for the master. However, when he lowered his head and saw the words on the cover of the book, he was immediately stunned. The Imperial Sword Manual. It was one of the 3 great sword manuals in the world. It was a martial art manual that the sword maniac fought over. Jean Xin stared at the unhurried figure with wide eyes. His heart was filled with excitement. Big Ice Cube, where have you been? Chu Qingyan looked at the person walking over and asked with a smile. Admiring the moon, Chu Qingyan looked at the sky. There were no stars or moon. She was speechless. Big Ice Cube, how elegant. They would arrive in Junlan tomorrow. However, because the border between the 2 countries was basically deserted or overgrown with trees, they had to sleep in the wilderness all the way. As a result, they hadn't had a good bath in the past few days. Coincidentally, they found a hot spring near a hidden cliff. Little girl, let's go to the hot spring. I haven't had a good bath in the past few days. As a clean freak, I can't take it anymore. Cheng Yinluo tugged at her and talked with a pained expression. Before Chu Qingyan could reply, Cheng Yinluo continued to brainwash her. You don't know, but the hot spring in the winter is very romantic. The spring water is warm. It can train one's willpower, maintain one's health, stretch one's muscles and bones, relieve fatigue, dredge one's meridians, and prolong one's life. For us women, it can moisturize the skin, nourish the skin, and resist aging. It can be said to be a great panacea. Cheng Yinluo rattled off a lot of things. Then, she put her hands on Chu Qingyan's shoulders, who was a little dizzy from her persuasion. Like a wolf grandmother, she tempted, Little girl, I have a unique massage technique. Do you want to try it? Chu Qingyan immediately nodded. With a beauty by my side, surrounded by mist, it's very romantic. So why wouldn't I? Chu Qingyan revealed a covetous look, which made Cheng Yinluo bend over with laughter. Thus, Chu Qingyan and the others happily prepared to soak in the hot spring. Before leaving, Chu Qingyan ran to Xiao Su. Big Ice Cube, Huling, and the others found a hot spring. I heard that there are 2 pools. We women will use one, and you can soak in the other one. Chu Qingyan didn't forget to repeat Cheng Yinluo's words, but changed the benefits for women to that for men to strengthen their bodies and strengthen their willpower. Seeing the little guy jumping around eagerly, Xiao Su was a little hesitant. Chu Qingyan, who had been left behind because of Big Ice Cube's instructions, was startled by her father's sudden appearance. Father, are you also going to soak in the hot spring? You can go with His Highness. No, Father has a plan, but I can't tell anyone. Father Chu said mysteriously. What plan? Although Chu Qingyan was eager to soak in the hot spring, she felt that her father's plan was more attractive because she was worried that her father would make trouble again. Father Chu smiled slyly. Chu Qingyan suddenly felt that something was wrong. Little girl? Qingyan? Cheng Yinluo went to the hot spring and looked at the misty pool. She was a little tempted. Since she couldn't call Chu Qingyan, she thought that she must have been delayed by something, so she didn't wait for her. Although she was dressed in coarse linen clothes, her beautiful body was hidden in the mist after she took off her belt. She lifted the tip of her foot to tap the water. When she felt that the temperature was just right, she stepped into the pool with ease. Father, what did you do? Chu Qingyan had a bad premonition. Murongju, get out of here. As soon as Chu Qingyan finished speaking, she heard a shrill voice. Wasn't that Yinluo's voice? Father. Chu Qingyan looked at her father, who was smiling slyly, and called out tentatively. It couldn't be what she had guessed. Father, You asked Xining to steal little Yama's clothes. Then, you pretended to tell Kong that little Yama was in urgent need of clothes, but he wasn't feeling well. Then, you gave him the clothes and asked him to deliver them. Then, your daughter will be hunted down. Chu Qingyin ran away. Chu Qingyin, where are you? Come out. I promise I won't beat you to death. The Yama's death warrant was coming. Chu Qingyin couldn't care about anything else. She used her lightness skill and went to the other side of the hill. Unfortunately, she didn't know that there was another hot spring there. When she stood at the top of the hill, she caught a glimpse of the familiar clothes by the side of the pool. Her head was steamed by the mist, and she panicked. The stone she stepped on loosened, and she fell into the pool. Chapter 310. The moment her foot missed, Chu Qingyin's mind only had 3 words left. It's all over. Although this height wasn't high, if she fell down with her body, it would be hard for her to survive. What was even more frightening was that she seemed to see a few white figures in her peripheral vision. Ah! She quickly covered her eyes and waited for her to fall into the water. She hoped that she wouldn't be too embarrassed when the time came. Chu Qingyin was already prepared to bear the brunt of the waves. But the moment she fell into the water, she felt 2 strong arms supporting her from behind. Using the slowing force of the water beneath her, the force of her fall was reduced, and she was firmly fixed in place. Her first thought was, I'm saved. Her second thought was, this skin is so smooth. Her third thought was, She desperately covered her eyes and loudly explained, I didn't do it on purpose. Please believe me. She didn't know who was hugging her, but they were all her own people. She felt that she had lost all face. Xiao Su looked at the little fellow in his arms. She was like a little hedgehog that didn't dare to see the light, and his lips curled. Suddenly, he heard whispers and laughter not far away. Xiao Su coldly looked over, and Hualing and the others immediately shut up. They automatically went ashore and quietly took the clothes on the shore, putting them on before leaving. Who told their master to not let the little princess be embarrassed, so they could only feel wronged and sneak away. Because they had been on the battlefield for a long time, it was normal for them to eat and sleep together. Moreover, their master was the kind of person who wouldn't be estranged from the soldiers, so when they bathed together by the river, their master had never refused. But today, they were only halfway through their bath when the little princess came out. What a pity, what a pity! Although Hualing and the others didn't make a sound when they left, the subtle sound of water still entered Chu Qingyin's ears. She covered her hands even tighter. Moreover, mixed in with the sulfur smell of the hot spring was a faint familiar ink fragrance. She suddenly realized, Big Ice? Do you still want to be an ostrich? She didn't know if it was because of the warmth of the hot spring, but it no longer sounded cold and even had a hint of ridicule. Hearing his voice, Chu Qingyin instantly let out a sigh of relief. She blinked and her eyelashes tickled her palms. She carefully asked, Did they all leave? They're staying to watch the play? His voice entered her ears again. Oh, then quickly put me down. Her entire body was submerged in the spring, but she was held in place by his arms, so she didn't sink. Although she had never soaked in hot springs, she had never eaten pork, but she had seen pigs run. Normally, hot springs wouldn't be too deep. Are you sure? Xiao Su looked at the person who was still covering his eyes and asked doubtfully. She nodded vigorously and did not hear the teasing in his words. Turn your back. I'll go ashore in a while. Xiao Su smiled and said, Okay. As to answer. Chu Qingyin was overjoyed. She let go of her hands and closed her eyes. She was prepared to turn and leave when he reached the bottom. But, what the hell? Her neck was already submerged, but she still hadn't reached the bottom? Gurgle, gurgle, help. Splash. Just as she was struggling, her collar was suddenly pulled out of the water by a force. Cough, cough. She spat out water in a panic. Her eyes were dry, and her ears were full of water. Chu Qingyin suddenly felt that the world was full of malice towards her. Xiao Su looked at the little fellow whose face was red from choking and shook his head with a smile. You can only blame yourself for being too short and the water is too deep, so you still have to eat the carrots. Chu Qingyin felt like she had been stabbed by the big ice cube again. After wiping off the water on her face, her vision cleared and a smooth and well-built chest came into view. TSK. She forgot to cover her eyes. Chu Qingyin felt that it was too late even if she covered her eyes. She hugged her shoulders and turned her gaze away in a huff. The big ice cube should have guessed it long ago, but he still let her enter the water. He must want to see her make a fool of herself. He didn't know where the little fellow's temper came from. Was it because he teased her just now? However, he could guess that the little fellow was feeling awkward. Xiao Su didn't care much. Usually, when he bathed in a group, he would wear pants, so he wasn't afraid of being exposed. Moreover, the little fellow was still young, so he didn't care about the boundaries between men and women. If Chu Qingyin knew what he was thinking, she would probably faint from anger. She was still a pure and innocent girl. I want to go back to the shore. Chu Qingyin didn't persist for long before she gave in. She had to leave this place quickly. If she saw something she shouldn't see. Also, the collar was making her uncomfortable. Xiao Su didn't refuse. He knew that he had teased her enough and that it was time to put her back. Thus, he waded towards the shore with her. Because Chu Qingyin fell into the water a little far away, she finally negotiated with him with a red face. Can you not hold my collar? I can't breathe. In the dense fog, the girl's slightly coquettish tone could be heard. Xiao Su's eyes moved. His hand that was holding her collar moved to her waist. He didn't say anything and continued to move forward. After feeling a little better, Chu Qingyin heaved a sigh of relief. Strictly speaking, she had to thank the big ice cube for saving her. Otherwise, with the depth just now, she was afraid that she wouldn't be able to keep her life. Add swimming to the must-learn skills, Xiao Su suddenly said. Chu Qingyin's face fell. She had escaped being forced to learn swimming, but she couldn't escape this. It seemed that everything was destined. Why did you run for your life? Xiao Su continued to ask. Chu Qingyin finally remembered the reason why she ran all the way just now. Her face paled. Wasn't it because Daddy wanted to help Ethereal and Yin Luo, who knew that he would go for wool and come home shorn? Instead, he killed his daughter. This was indeed something that her father would do. Xiao Su didn't think much of it. At this moment, there was a sudden clap of thunder. Chu Qingyin, where are you hiding? Come out! An angry roar was heard. Xiao Su frowned when he heard the voice. He felt something strange on his body. He lowered his head, only to see a furry head. His limbs were entangled by her like an octopus. Her clothes were soaked, while his upper body was naked. Xiao Su was a little startled. When he subconsciously wanted to lift her up, he didn't expect her to cling to him tightly. Her eyes were bright, sparkling, and as soft as water. Big ice cube, I don't want to be cut into 8 pieces by Yin Luo. You have to save me. Looking into her watery eyes, the hand that had stopped in midair finally fell gently. I've never seen you so timid. His tone was disdainful, but his actions were gentle. A barefooted person isn't afraid of wearing shoes. I'm afraid that she has all kinds of poisonous powders, poisons, scorpions, and silver needles. If she uses me to refine medicine one day, I'll be done for. Chu Qingyin wanted to cry, but had no tears. She didn't realize how tempting their position was. Chapter 311. How do you want me to help you? Xiao Su was amused when he heard her. Chu Qingyin scratched her head. This was indeed a difficult problem. She rolled her eyes and said, since Sister Yin Luo can't find me, why don't we go out tonight to avoid trouble? Are you sure? Yes, I'm very sure. Hence, a bonfire was set up near the hot spring. Next to it was a temporary drying rack with Chu Qingyin's clothes and accessories. She sat by the bonfire, wearing Xiao Su's loose clothes. She raised her arms and felt that she could sing in an opera in these clothes. She wrapped herself in the clothes and smelled a faint fragrance. She blinked and buried her nose in the clothes. It smelled really good. She raised her head and looked at the man who was adding firewood to the fire. He was only wearing a thin shirt and looked calm. He was only adding to the fire, but his posture was very elegant. This was the first time she could do such a small thing as if it was just brewing tea or playing chess. It mainly depended on one's temperament. Xiao Su watched her fiddle with the clothes for a long time. He put down the firewood and waved at her. Come here. Chu Qingyan leaned over when she heard him. Xiao Su naturally raised his hand to help her roll up her long sleeves and straighten her slightly open lapels. Chu Qingyan was curious when she felt his meticulous care. Big ice cube. Have you taken care of others before? Do you think that I need to take care of others? Xiao Su retracted his hand with a look of disdain on his face. She had even used the word prince. It seemed like she had asked a stupid question. However, she couldn't help but be suspicious. She felt that Big Ice Cube was getting more and more familiar with taking care of others. When did this start? Xiao Su saw through her thoughts and suppressed the twitching of his eyes. She was really taking advantage of him. Until now, she was the only one who could get his care and concern. However, he knew that most children at this age were ingrates, so he didn't take it to heart. Suddenly, the little guy came over and unfolded his coat, draping it over the two of them. Big Ice Cube, let's put it on together. You won't feel cold. Chu Qingyan carefully put it on him. I don't need it. Xiao Su pretended to take it away, but she stopped him. Do you know that 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2? Sometimes it's greater than 2. For example, our bodies can warm each other up. It's not as simple as just our body temperature, Chu Qingyan said seriously. Xiao Su felt that her head was filled with too many fallacious theories. If she could apply them to her studies, she would be able to reach a higher level. However, he did not reject her. He reached out and pulled her into his arms. She was right. It would be warmer this way. Big Ice Cube, you're really good to me. Thinking back on the past, Chu Qingyan felt a little emotional. It's good that you know, Xiao Su replied casually. Will you always be so good to me? People are always greedy. After they get it, they will want more. She was afraid of the impermanence of the world, afraid of the 8 hardships of life, birth, old age, illness and death, love and separation, resentment for a long time. Can't let go, afraid that something that is still in front of her will disappear in the blink of an eye. Tonight, she didn't understand. She just followed her heart and asked. A long time later, when she understood the meaning of love, she realized that what she wanted that night was just a promise. Hearing this, he thought it was a child's uneasiness, but he always kept his word. He would not lie, let alone be perfunctory, so he was silent for a moment, thinking seriously. In my lifetime, saying forever was too harsh, because he didn't know how far she was talking about forever. Her whole life? Or his whole life? He didn't know how long her life was, and he couldn't decide how long he could live. Then in my lifetime, when I'm alive, I'll always be the same to you. Promise too long. I'm afraid I can't do it. Chu Qingyan didn't know that her casual question had turned his heart over 1,000 times before he gave her this answer. Me too. She smiled sweetly, but her heart twitched when she recalled Su Jian's words. Taking advantage of the dark night and the two of them being alone, she mustered up her courage and said softly, If there comes a day when I have no choice but to leave, you have to live well too. You can't be bullied by others. No one had told her that she had transmigrated here. She was afraid that one day she would also mysteriously leave. When Xiao Su heard this, he retracted his gaze and looked at her. His small face was filled with loneliness. His large hand fell and pinched her small face. This prince feels that I've raised a little ingrate. When she was by his side, she was already thinking about the future when she would no longer be around. At this time, the crackling of the firewood covered his words. Chu Qingyan only cared about the pain of her cheeks being pinched. Hey, Big Ice Block, please be a gentleman and don't bully a lady. Would a lady jump off a cliff and disturb others soaking in a hot spring? He retorted. Chu Qingyan's mouth twitched. This person really holds a grudge. Where did the cold-blooded Prince of Ing, who had no desires and no desires, go? Quietly nestled in his arms, Chu Qingyan felt that his embrace was just enough to fill her space. Big Ice Block, I think we look like Ali and Inuyasha. Xiao Su raised his eyebrows. Another strange name. Xiao Su didn't ask, and she didn't explain. She just sat there quietly. Some people said that the people closest to you wouldn't feel awkward even if they stayed silent. She and Big Ice Cube were probably the closest people to each other. She felt that this was quite good. The night was getting darker, and the person in his arms had fallen asleep. The little fellow had changed into her own clothes, but his clothes were still covering the two of them. He had been used to such cold at the border, but he was afraid that she couldn't stand it. He continued to add firewood. In fact, he didn't understand why he didn't refuse when she said that she wanted to come out to seek refuge. Was Chung Yinluo worth him being afraid of? It was just that at that time, he was soft-hearted, or perhaps he couldn't ignore her pleading eyes. At this time, the two of them were snuggling alone in the cold wind. In a magnificent palace in the Junlan state, a maid hurried into a splendid room. "Mistress, this servant has already received news that His Highness King Ing will enter our borders tomorrow." The maid spoke very quickly because she knew that her mistress was waiting for this news. Rose Danka fell on the table instantly. Her jade fingers and the emerald stone table reflected each other, making them look even whiter and more lustrous. Is the news reliable? I guarantee that it's 100% reliable. They all knew how much their master valued His Royal Highness. This news had not been verified dozens of times, so they would never dare to report it. "Good. He's finally here." Her voice was as smooth as a pearl, and she was very happy. Chapter 312. Xiao Su looked at the peaceful appearance of the person in his arms and smiled. She was usually noisy and lively like a kitten, but when she was asleep, she was very well behaved. He knew that when he was wrongly imprisoned, she was brave and smart, doing everything possible to prove his innocence. When he was unconscious, she was stubborn and strong, desperately wanting him to live. Everyone had 1,000 faces, but he hoped that she only needed to live a carefree life. The fire slowly burned out, and the surroundings darkened. He didn't continue to add wood. He had let her fool around for a night, and it was time to go back. Xiao Su stood up with the person in his arms, crossed the bonfire that only had a few sparks left, and slowly walked to the other side of the road. A long time later, when someone asked her what had left the deepest impression on her during her growing up, she would answer with a smile. Chu Qingyin smiled. There should be someone who was willing to tolerate her foolishness with the greatest tolerance. The most ridiculous thing was that it was most likely to last until the end of time. When the two of them returned to the station, Chung Yinluo came up to them angrily. But when she saw Chu Qingyin sleeping peacefully, she took a deep breath and turned around. "Miss Chung," Xiao Su called out to her. Chung Yinluo was surprised that this person, who was usually unapproachable, would take the initiative to talk to her. But before she could calm down, Chung Yinluo turned around and said rudely, "Young Master Xiao, what advice do you have for me?" "Miss Chung, I think that if you care about Ethereal, you should bury the hatchet. If you are tired of him," Xiao Su looked at her deeply, "let's cut him in half and end it all." Chung Yinluo stood rooted to the ground. She stared blankly as he carried Chu Qingyin behind her. Suddenly, she chuckled. "Young Master Xiao, you haven't experienced the feeling of liking someone, have you?" Xiao Su stopped in his tracks and frowned, but he didn't turn around. Chung Yinluo turned around and looked at Xiao Su's back. She smiled mischievously. "How can you understand the feeling of not being able to love someone and not being able to hate someone when you've never loved someone?" Xiao Su did not deny her words. Indeed, he had never been in love before. "What about you?" Xiao Su asked. "Me?" Chung Yinluo was stunned and said in an angry voice, "Then he must know more than you. Murongju, that bastard." As soon as she finished speaking, she saw the person standing under the tree with his back facing the fire. His white robes fluttered in the wind, and his eyes were filled with joy. Xiao Su didn't say anything more because he didn't need to. He lifted the person in his arms and continued forward. "Thank you, Master." He heard this as he passed by Ethereal. "Go." Xiao Su didn't say anything else and walked back to his carriage. When he reached a corner where no one could see him, Xiao Su curled his lips. "When are you going to stop pretending to be asleep?" The person in his arms slowly opened her eyes and smiled ingratiatingly. "Big Ice Cube, I just woke up. I heard you talking to Sister Yinluo, so I didn't want to disturb you." "Don't talk like that." Xiao Su corrected her and put her down. Chu Qingyin saluted him. "Yes, Master." Seeing Big Ice Cube get on the horse carriage, Chu Qingyin wanted to get on as well. However, she heard a familiar meow. Chu Qingyin's eyes twitched, and she turned around. "Father, why aren't you sleeping? What are you doing here? I'm not worried that little Yama will harm you." Mr. Chu looked aggrieved. Chu Qingyin was touched and hugged her father. "Father, you're so kind." However, while Chu Qingyin was touched, she forgot that her father was the one who had started all this. Mr. Chu chuckled. "It's good that you know. Oh yeah, where did you go with Green Onion?" Chu Qingyin pulled away from her father's embrace and looked at him suspiciously. "Are you here to fish for information?" "No, I'm just asking." Mr. Chu's eyes darted around. He didn't look trustworthy at all. "Father, you're getting more and more nosy. Don't forget that you were the one who made Ethereal and Sister Yenluo get together. The war implicated me and caused me to fall from the mountain." The more Chu Qingyin spoke, the more indignant she felt. Huling and the rest wouldn't think that she was a peeping Tom, would they? "Kai, don't forget that I was the one who made it possible for you and Green Onion to spend time alone tonight." Mr. Chu said mischievously. "Isn't this what they mean by unintentionally planting a green onion and growing a shade?" "Yes, unintentionally planting a willow and growing a shade?" Chu Qingyin felt that her father's way of thinking was on a completely different level. "Father, don't get involved in Ethereal and Sister Yinluo's matters anymore. We're outsiders, so we should just watch. I'm afraid that the more we help, the more trouble we'll cause," Chu Qingyin said earnestly. She didn't know how much her father would listen to, but she had to say it anyway. Mr. Chu didn't think much of it. "If I hadn't done all this, would Hollow have been able to talk to the little king of hell?" "Father, that wasn't talking. That was physical violence." She wasn't wrong. She saw the obvious handprint on Ethereal's face. Mr. Chu scratched his head. "It's true that I didn't think it through thoroughly." Chu Qingyin nodded. It seemed that her father had listened to her and was about to get into the carriage. "Next time I'll think of something else." Chu Qingyin's leg tilted, and she almost fell. Mr. Chu clenched his fists and encouraged himself. Then he rushed back to his carriage excitedly. "Cough, cough. Ethereal, Yinluo, you're on your own now." Chu Qingyin climbed into the carriage on all fours. It wasn't until she got into the carriage that Chu Qingyin realized in hindsight that Big Ice Cube must have heard everything she and her father had said. She felt a little embarrassed. After all, part of what her father had said was about her and him. However, the moment she got into the carriage, Big Ice Cube told her, "The hand warmer is over there. Take it yourself." She looked at the hand warmer lying on the couch and heaved a sigh of relief. Okay. The sky was gradually turning bright. She had just taken a nap, so she wasn't sleepy. She sat in the carriage, feeling a little bored. She recalled Yinluo's question and was extremely curious. "Big Ice Cube, if you meet the woman you like one day, what will you do?" Xiao Su slowly opened his eyes. It was a little dark in the carriage, but his eyes were slightly bright. Chu Qingyin felt that Big Ice Cube's eyes were really beautiful. However, when he looked at her like that, she felt a little guilty. Nevertheless, she still had expectations for his answer. There's no need to answer this kind of assumption. Xiao Su closed his eyes again. Chu Qingyin felt a little disappointed. However, she soon cheered up. She propped up her chin and said longingly, "If I meet the person I like one day, I'll definitely treat him very, very well." "Very, very well? How good would that be?" Xiao Su frowned. Was there anyone better than him who would treat her better? "Why aren't you sleeping?" "I can't sleep. If you say you're sleepy tomorrow, go out and ride a horse." Chu Qingyin's little longing was shattered just like that. Big Ice Cube was so fierce. Chapter 313. Early in the morning, the group set off for the border of Junlan. Not far ahead was the place where the inspection was conducted. "Why is it so strict this time? What happened?" Xiao Su raised his eyebrows less than 100 meters away from the city gate. He summoned Hualing and asked, "I don't know either. I heard that the higher-ups gave the order to tighten the security. Fortunately, we obtained a customs document before. Otherwise, it would be difficult to enter the city now." He had sent people to investigate the matter of strengthening the security, But unfortunately, they found nothing. It can only be said that this order came out of nowhere. Yes, when we enter the past later, no matter what happens, you are not allowed to make a move. Xiao Su had no clue at this time, but he vaguely felt that this matter was a little strange. As far as he knew, Junlan had been peaceful on the surface in recent years, but there had been internal strife. However, its diplomatic relations with other countries were still good. The Emperor of Junlan shouldn't be most concerned about the border. Yes, Huling nodded. Even without the master's orders, they wouldn't act rashly. After all, there was no need for Sichuan here. A strong dragon couldn't suppress a local snake. Chu Qingyin faintly felt that something was wrong from the conversation between the two. Could it be that there would be some changes in Junlan? Xiao Su turned around and met her worried eyes. He asked, "What are you thinking about?" "Big ice cube, it's been half a month. We can't make any mistakes." Chu Qingyin was worried. "Don't worry. I'll take care of everything." Xiao Su wasn't good at comforting people. This was the only thing he could say. Chu Qingyin nodded. However, even with his assurance this time, she still felt uneasy. Because they came to Junlan as merchants and had proof of their previous dealings, they quickly passed through. The place they arrived at was the town on the edge of Junlan. It could be said that it was the most chaotic place. There were merchants from various countries, as well as people from the pugilistic world. There were also many petty thieves. Chu Qingyin and company kept a low profile, but the goods in the carriage had attracted the attention of others. However, Hualing and the others were well built, and it was obvious that they were not easy to bully. Those greedy eyes only glanced at them for a second or two before reluctantly looking away. "Mistress, I heard that Junlan is very rich, but why does this town look so dilapidated?" Xining asked curiously. Xining couldn't be blamed for asking such a question, because as soon as they entered the city, they saw the flying yellow soil, dilapidated houses, and broken wine flags. The passers-by were in a hurry, and they rarely saw any good cloth on their bodies. Except for the foreigners whose clothes were slightly better, they basically wore coarse linen clothes, and there were beggars everywhere. Because this is the border between countries, once a war breaks out, these places will be the first to bear the brunt. Needless to say, there will be damage and destruction. Therefore, most emperors will not spend too much effort to develop these places, because if the flames of war ignite, they will not feel too much of a pity. Before Chu Qingyin could answer, Jean Xian, who had gotten off the carriage to lead the horse, answered. Jean Xian's expression was normal, and he didn't even think before answering. This made Chu Qingyin a little surprised. "Jean Xian, I didn't expect you to know so much. This subordinate doesn't know either." Chu Qingyin's words made him stop in his tracks. In fact, he also didn't understand why he knew these things. "Mistress, is Jean Xian right?" Xining turned her head to ask. Chu Qingyin nodded. Jean Xian is right. In order not to waste resources, emperors will not develop the economy here. So the people living in the towns around the border will be prepared to pack up and flee at any time when war breaks out. Xining nodded, indicating that she understood. "Turin, I feel like I'm falling behind more and more. I actually see 3 10-year-old children discussing this kind of national policy. Shouldn't they be playing with mud at this age?" Hualing was a little shocked. Turin looked at him with disdain. "At this age, I've already learned 2 sets of spear techniques." Wood Spirit also followed up. "At the young master's age, I can already carve 8 immortals crossing the sea out of palm-sized wood." Ethereal didn't fall behind. At that time, I had already started studying medicine. Developing more than 10 kinds of poisons wasn't a problem. Hualing felt very hurt. He was just complaining. When he was 10 years old, he was thrown off a cliff by his master and learned Qinggong, all right? At this time, Father Chu walked over and patted his shoulder. He said regretfully, "It's fine. You can still learn a lot more right now. I'll reluctantly teach you how to dance." Hualing's lips twitched. He lowered his left shoulder and slowly escaped from Father Chu's evil clutches. Then he said with a grateful expression, "Thank you. This subordinate still feels that sword dancing is more suitable for me." Father Chu looked at Hualing, who had slipped away, and gave a slight sigh. He said with incomparable regret, "Few bosom friends, who would listen when the string is broken. Yuan Lang, what are you still standing there for? It's time to eat. Hey, you're here. What are we eating for lunch? Chu Machen's father immediately put away his enigmatic look and skipped over to him. They were currently in a tea house. Although the exterior was open and the entire building was about to tilt, what was surprising was that it was still standing properly. If you wanted to understand a place, you had to go to the place where the crowd flowed the fastest. When their group sat down, the waiter came up to inquire. I want to eat beggar's chicken, braised lion's head in brown sauce, and 8 kinds of rare mushrooms. When Father Chu opened his mouth, the people at the surrounding tables broke out in laughter. Father Chu scratched his head and asked the person beside him, Kai, did Father say something wrong? Are the names of these dishes funny? Chu Qingyan tugged on her father's sleeve and whispered, Father, these places don't have the dishes you want. Oh, then I'll change to something else. Father Chu thought very seriously, then said to the waiter, Then just give us any abalone or sea cucumber. The waiter was in a difficult position. Sir, we don't have those that swim in the water. Those that fly in the sky are fine too. Father Chu looked like he was in a difficult position. Chu Qingyan really had to hand it to her father. Brother waiter, just serve whatever signature dishes you have here. Chu Qingyan spoke up to save the waiter from his embarrassment. All right, sir. Father Chu shook his head in disappointment. There's nothing good to eat. The people around them couldn't stop laughing. However, because of Father Chu's jesting, many of the people around them shifted their vigilant gazes away. It was just a pair of young masters bringing a pair of foolish parents out, so there was nothing to be vigilant about. While waiting for the dishes, Chu Qingyan heard drinking, playing finger-guessing games, and all sorts of discussions coming from all around. Hey, Brother Su, have you heard? The imperial court is going to be in turmoil again. Brother Su, what do you mean? Our emperor just ascended the throne not long ago. What could happen? 2 people dressed like scholars were discussing in low voices. Xiao Su's hand that was holding the teacup paused, his eyes dark. Chapter 314. Brother Su, that's because you've been engrossed in reading for the past few days, so you haven't heard about it. The man in green smiled and then whispered, Our current ruler used an iron fist to sit in his current position. In the past, there was still the previous emperor. Now that the previous emperor has died, half of the funeral is over. Those vassals are beginning to stir. Brother, is what you said true? The man in blue was a little surprised. The man in green said mysteriously, I heard all this. Didn't I go to Qing City a while ago? I happened to meet 2 officials who were drinking and heard it from them. That's too scary. What should we do? If there's a war, the ones who will be hurt the most are us common people. The man in blue looked panicked, as if a storm was coming. The green-robed man patted him on the shoulder. What's there to worry about? We'll just be monks and strike the bell every day. At worst, we'll escape to a safe place and come back when the war is over. Anyway, whoever becomes the emperor has nothing to do with us as long as the world is peaceful. When Chu Qingyan heard this, she sighed in her heart. In the hearts of the common people, eating was the most important thing. They would support whoever was in power as long as they didn't have to worry about food and clothing. This was the tragedy of power politics. Big Ice Cube, it sounds like Junlan isn't as peaceful as it seems on the surface. Chu Qingyan turned to Xiao Su and said, Yes, the previous emperor of Junlan had 5 or 6 brothers. He used extreme means to ascend the throne, so these brothers were happy on the surface, but not convinced in their hearts. Because he didn't ascend the throne properly, it was difficult to convince the masses, so the previous emperor could only put these brothers on the land to appease the court officials. After all this was done, the power of the vassals had already grown. Until the previous emperor died, these vassals kept each other in check. When the new emperor ascended the throne, these people began to be restless. In fact, it's normal because this is politics. Xiao Su didn't want to explain so much. Although the parenting manual said that a girl only needed to know how to play the zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting, he still felt that his people should be well-rounded and shouldn't be restricted to women's boudoir skills. So he explained the situation in Junlan to her. Chu Qingyan listened to Xiao Su's words, and combined with the chatter of the tea house guests, she roughly knew what kind of situation Junlan was in. Extreme measures? That was to say, the throne did not belong to him, but he took it. It went without saying that there was some kind of conspiracy involved, and it was certain that it would arouse public anger. Moreover, the late Emperor of Junlan was disrespectful and had countless concubines in his harem. He even reached out to the wives and daughters of his ministers. He was simply a beast, and this new emperor not only had to deal with the mess left by his father, but also had to face the covetous uncles. It could be said that he was besieged on all sides because the vassals who had been saving their strength for so long would definitely look for an opportunity to make a move. Although she sympathized with the former emperor, Chu Qingyan was more worried that they would encounter internal strife on their journey and be dragged into it. If that happened, their journey would be delayed again. Hualing informed the others that we will set off after we finish our meal and strive to reach the next town early tomorrow morning. Xiao Su put down his chopsticks and ordered in a serious tone. Chu Qingyan nodded slightly. Big Ice Cube's order was exactly what she wanted. It was better for her to leave this country as soon as possible. Now, she wished she could grow wings and fly away from this country. However, she had studied the map. If she wanted to reach Jiang country as soon as possible, she could only walk in a straight line across the entire Junlan. Then, she would inevitably enter the most prosperous capital of Junlan. She hoped that the internal strife would not start by then. Everyone began to eat in a hurry because they had to fight for time on their journey. At this time, the people at the other table began to discuss again. Do you know that our new emperor's younger sister, Princess Zime, is now 16 years old? It seems that it's time for her to get married. An old man stroked his beard and said unhurriedly, I heard that Princess Zime is as beautiful as a flower. She is the #1 beauty in Junlan. I wonder which family's good man has such good fortune? A burly man laughed. His eyes rolled, and he looked like he was drooling. Another young man laughed and said, that must be a noble young man from a famous family. How can we commoners have such good fortune? What's so good about being the emperor's son-in-law? Do you remember the previous emperor's younger sister, Princess Royal Fu? Other than her own emperor's son-in-law, how many male companions did she have in her harem? I heard that you can't even count them with 2 hands. Someone interrupted. You are a typical case of sour grapes when you can't eat them. I heard that our Princess Zime already has someone in her heart. It seems that he is a general from some country. It happened 2 years ago, so I can't remember clearly. Another busybody said, Hey, why do you care so much? What does it have to do with us commoners? Another person said. Thus, this topic was changed. Chu Qingyan was very curious about this Princess Zime. After all, women were more gossipy about such matters. Unfortunately, these people had changed the topic. Princess Zime? Master, she. Hualing frowned and could not help but blurt out. However, when he dared to say it, he was suppressed by his master's gaze. Don't gossip about people. Xiao Su glanced at him indifferently. Hualing immediately fell silent. Chu Qingyan looked at the two of them suspiciously. She was about to ask what was wrong with Princess Zime, but everyone was ready to hurry, so she kept quiet. In the following days, everyone traveled day and night regardless of rain or shine. The 10-day journey was compressed into 6 days, and they arrived at the capital of Junlan. Although there were no twists and turns along the way, and there was no internal strife in Junlan, the closer they got to the capital, the more tense the atmosphere became. However, no one took it to heart. As long as they passed through the capital, it could be said that they were far away from the center of the whirlpool. The security in the capital was stricter than in other cities. There were even more soldiers at the city gate checking passers-by than in other cities. Each of them had a serious expression and were extraordinarily powerful. The inspection process was also more complicated. The group was questioned for a long time before they were finally allowed to pass. Chu Qingyan heaved a sigh of relief. Just as she was about to turn around and call for her father to follow, a group of soldiers suddenly appeared out of nowhere. They held long spears and surrounded the group of them. The group of soldiers quickly gathered together, and Chu Qingyan's heart was in her throat. The general in charge of checking the passers-by saw this and immediately ran over. What is this? I've already checked these people. There is no problem. "Lordly, please take a look at this token." The leader showed the token in his hand. The general immediately understood. So it was an order from that person. Then I won't delay this colleague from handling the case. Please continue. Chapter 315. Before Chu Qingyan could clearly see what was written on the token, it had already been taken away by the officer. "Everyone, come with this lowly official," the blue-robed officer said to Xiao Su and the others. Everyone was caught off guard by the sudden change. Turin stepped forward as the steward and asked politely, "May I ask this officer? We just came from Sichuan and did business dutifully. We haven't done anything outrageous. Please give us an explanation for arresting us for no reason." The blue-robed officer's face stiffened. "If you want an explanation, you'll know when we get there. This officer, you don't have any evidence and won't give an explanation. Don't you think this is too overbearing? You're simply bullying us foreign commoners." Hualing spoke without thinking and said with a displeased expression, "My master said that if you don't think the matter is too big, then go ahead and make a fuss." The blue-robed officer didn't seem to be worried that they wouldn't obediently follow him. Chu Qingyan's eyes hardened when she heard this. Their group had concealed their names and traveled thousands of miles to come here. They didn't dare reveal their identities because they were afraid of attracting the assassins from Sichuan. And this officer in front of them seemed to know something, which was why he spoke so shamelessly. "Big ice cube." Chu Qingyan turned her head, wanted to ask Xiao Su for his opinion. At this time, Xiao Su raised his hand to call back Turin and Hualing. He said to the blue-robed officer, "We'll go with you. At least you're tactful. Master said that you didn't need to wear chains, so you obediently surrendered." "Sure enough, it's as Master said." The blue-robed officer sneered and waved his hand for his subordinates to take them away. Chu Qingyan watched as the carriage was seized and the others were chased into the carriage and driven away by the officers. She felt very upset, but it was useless to say more now because these people clearly came for them. She didn't know what was waiting for them in Junlan. Chu Qingyan felt the uneasiness in her heart grow stronger. Hualing looked at the officers in front of him and asked Turin in a low voice, "Who do you think sent these people?" When he raised the token, I took a look at it. It looked like the token of Princess Zimei's residence. Turin's face revealed a worried expression. Something like this happening at this critical juncture was simply one disaster after another. "I guessed it was her. Otherwise, who would dare to detain us so openly?" Hualing was a bit disdainful. "I never thought that after 2 years, she still wouldn't give up on Master." "Don't gossip about people." Turin repeated his master's words to him. Hualing narrowed his eyes and gave a cold snort. He didn't believe that he wasn't thinking the same thing. Chu Qingyan, who was sitting in the carriage, looked at the surrounding soldiers through the window. She frowned slightly. After lowering the curtain, she turned her head and asked, "Big Ice Block, have you offended anyone in Junlan? It can't be considered an offense." Xiao Su's expression was calm, and his mood didn't fluctuate because of her words. It was just a tactful rejection of a young girl's feelings. But to him, it was already at the back of his mind. Chu Qingyan held her chin with both hands and was very helpless. "Big Ice Block, I think you have a physique that attracts hatred easily. From Sichuan to Junlan, there are always people who want to make trouble for you." Xiao Su nodded seriously. "Indeed, my life hasn't been smooth sailing." Chu Qingyan was amused by his serious appearance. "Big Ice Block, your skill at telling dry jokes is getting better and better. All roads lead to the same destination." She still laughed happily. The blue-robed officer heard the laughter coming from the carriage and was a bit surprised. They were already in this situation, yet they were still in the mood to joke. It had to be said that the people his master had captured were quite brave. However, his master had instructed him not to beat, scold, or punish them. He didn't know what status these people had to be able to gain his master's favor. The carriage quickly left the busy city and went towards a quiet road. Along the way, there were large gates and courtyards. With a glance, one could tell that they were all wealthy families. The blue-robed officer took them around 2 streets and then went towards an even more luxurious street. Whoosh! The carriage stopped. "Please get off the carriage." The blue-robed officer changed his tough attitude from before and said politely, "After all, these people were invited by his master and couldn't be neglected." After Chu Qingyan got off the carriage, she found that they were standing next to a side door behind a high wall. The saffron side door was already open and waiting for them to go in. Since they were already here, they didn't have any plans to be timid. Chu Qingyan and everyone stepped into the courtyard, and the side door was closed a moment after they came in. At this time, a housekeeper and a mama stood in front of everyone. "You have come from afar. Coincidentally, my master has yet to return from the palace. However, my master has instructed us not to neglect you, so I would like to invite you to follow Nanny Yi to see where you will be staying." Although this housekeeper was old, his shrewd appearance could not be underestimated. "Esteemed guests, please follow this old servant," Imama said from the side. This mama, looked to be in her 40s or 50s, but her skin was well maintained. She looked like she was pampered and had a rigid expression. Her every move seemed to be well-trained. Chu Qingyan guessed that this person might be an instructor from the Junlan imperial family. These people didn't mention the identity of the master of this residence, but these buildings were luxurious and luxurious. Ordinary people couldn't live in them. Moreover, they had the right to raise soldiers. It seemed like they were from the imperial family. Chu Qingyan and the others didn't say much and followed Mama Yi. Chu Qingyan looked around and asked in a low voice, "Big ice block, have you been here before?" "No." Xiao Su looked at her cautious appearance and smiled. "You don't have to worry. I know the master of this residence." "You know him? Who is he?" Chu Qingyan was surprised. "I wasn't sure just now, but when I saw the layout of this residence, I guessed it." Junlan respected etiquette very much. So from worship and funerals down to food and daily life, there were social laws and regulations and behavior rules. The building of this manor had already exceeded the area that the court officials could live in. Coupled with this person's methods of doing things, it was not difficult to guess. Xiao Su said indifferently, "You're the one who heard the most gossip along the way." Chu Qingyan felt her cheeks heat up when Big Ice Block pointed out that she had been obsessed with gossip. However, she quickly reacted. "Princess Zime? The sister of the new emperor of Junlan, from the same mother?" Now, besides the empress, she was the most honorable woman in Junlan. Xiao Su nodded. Chu Qingyan was shocked. She felt as if a rumored celebrity had suddenly become close to her life. But although she was surprised, her mind began to work. This Princess Zime had brought them to the residence for no reason. What did she want? Thinking of the news she had heard in the tea house, Chu Qingyan looked up at the person beside her. Suddenly, she had a bad feeling. Chapter 316. Could it be that the rumored general that Princess Zime admired was? Chu Qingyan looked at the person beside her, who was always cold and calm no matter when and where, and felt a little uncomfortable. At this time, she still didn't know what jealousy was. She only felt a little uncomfortable in her heart, but this kind of discomfort couldn't be told to others. Xiao Su noticed that something was wrong with her and lowered his head to ask, "Are you uncomfortable?" Chu Qingyan seemed to have been exposed and immediately shook her head. Xiao Su saw that her eyes were flickering and wanted to ask more, but he knew that this was not the right place, so he stopped the thought. "Honorable guests, this is the place where you will rest for the next few days. There will be a special servant girl to take you in," Imama said as she led everyone to a gorgeous courtyard. Chu Qingyan glanced around. She had to say that the owner of this courtyard was really generous. All the decorations were exquisite to the smallest corner. Whether it was the flowers, trees, or the buildings, they were all extremely magnificent. Just as Chu Qingyan was about to pull Xiao Su into the room, Imama stopped Xiao Su with a smile. "Honorable guest, your room is not here. Master has other arrangements." Her smile was just right, but it seemed to be a fake one. Chu Qingyan stepped forward. "Why is my cousin not with us? What do you want to do?" Chu Qingyan's question didn't get Imama's attention. It seemed that in her eyes, Chu Qingyan and others were lowly commoners, and only Xiao Su could make her treat them differently. Nanny Yi ignored Chu Qingyan. Instead, she bowed to Xiao Su and said, "The master's arrangements are not for us to know. Young master, please do not make things difficult for us." Xiao Su's expression didn't change much when he heard this. He raised his hand and patted the little fellow's shoulder, indicating that she shouldn't act rashly. Then he said to Imama, "Please lead the way." Nanny was very satisfied with Xiao Su's tactfulness. She said, "Please," and led the way. Cheng Yinluo stepped forward and put her arm around Chu Qingyin's shoulders. She chuckled softly and said, "Little girl, don't worry. What's yours will always be yours. Don't worry too much." Chu Qingyin was exasperated and amused at the same time. "Sister Yinluo, what are you talking about? I don't understand. And why don't you look worried at all? Your big ice cube isn't a child. Moreover, judging from the attitude of these people, they are treating him as a distinguished guest. If we travel with him, we can bask in his glory. No one will dare to make things difficult for us." Cheng Yinluo didn't care about the current situation at all. It was rare for her to be able to enter a place where royalty lived. Of course, she wanted to experience it properly. All right, he had no choice but to lower his head when he was under someone else's roof. Chu Qingyin could only follow the arrangement of the master she had never met. They were staying in a courtyard. There were 2 rooms on the east, west, and west sides of the courtyard, which were enough for them to stay in. There was also a large hall on the east side where they could chat and eat. After everyone had tidied up, it was time for dinner. A group of maidservants slowly walked into the hall with delicious dishes in their hands. Their movements were light and graceful, and they walked quietly. It wasn't hard to imagine how strict the rules of this mansion were. Even the smile on everyone's lips was exactly the same. If they didn't look so different, I would have thought that they were made from the same mold. Cheng Yinluo smacked her lips and complained. If they are from the palace, they have undergone training. They are more well-behaved than the servants in the mansion. Chu Qingyin replied casually. Her mind was elsewhere. She glanced at everyone. Almost everyone had arrived, but she didn't see Big Ice Cube. She turned to one of the maidservants and asked, "Do you know where the young master who came with us is having his meal?" The maidservant shook her head. "I don't know. Please enjoy your meal." Thus, the group retreated. Cheng Yinluo poked her arm. "Don't think too much. After a day's journey, you should be hungry. Look, your father is eating so happily. These dishes must be delicious." Chu Qingyin looked at her father, who was eating happily. She sighed. In the past, whenever something happened to Big Ice Cube, her father would be the first to bear the brunt. Why did it seem like nothing had happened today? As if sensing his daughter's gaze, Father Chu immediately protected his bowl. "Kai, eat your own food." When he said this, everyone at the table couldn't help but burst into laughter. Chu Qingyin's mouth twitched. Did she look like someone who would steal someone's rice bowl? However, this interlude still made her feel a little better. At this time, Hua Ling spoke up. "Little young master, don't worry. Nothing will happen to master. Besides, Turin is also here." Chu Qingyin felt that Hua Ling seemed to know something. His tone was a little strange. She couldn't help but ask, "Why didn't you go with Turin to protect your master?" Hua Ling smiled. "Master asked this subordinate to stay behind to protect you." Hua Ling's words sounded normal, but Chu Qingyin felt that something was wrong. She had never been to Junlan before. If the owner of this manor wanted to find trouble, he wouldn't have found her. Could it be that something would happen next that even Big Ice Cube couldn't predict? Little girl, overthinking it will be as bad as falling short. Come, eat a piece of red braised pork to nourish your brain. Cheng Yinluo teased. Perhaps her worries were unnecessary. Chu Qingyin rubbed her forehead and started to pick up her chopsticks. Before everything was clear, it was better for her not to let her imagination run wild. Perhaps when Princess Zime returned, whatever purpose she had, the clouds would be cleared and the sky would be clear. Chu Qingyin picked up some food with her chopsticks for her parents and started eating seriously. This was the first time in a long time that she ate without Big Ice Cube to accompany her. Sometimes, once a habit was formed, it was difficult to change it. The curtain of night had just fallen, and specks of light suddenly lit up the streets of the capital. A gorgeous carriage came out of the palace gates and began to rush towards the princess's residence. Soon, they arrived at the princess's residence where Chu Qingyin and the others were staying. Imama had already brought some people to wait at the entrance. When the carriage stopped, a maid placed a small wooden stool beside the carriage. Imama stepped forward and lifted the curtain. "Master, you're back." The person in the carriage replied with a pleasant voice. A white wrist answered and took Imama's outstretched hand. Then, she slowly walked out. A lake blue palace dress cascaded down as she bent over. The golden silk on top reflected the light from the two lanterns in front of the residence. It was brilliant and dazzling. What was even more amazing was that beautiful face with eyebrows like willow leaves and clear phoenix eyes. "Where is he?" After landing, Junmei asked with a smile. "He has been arranged in Luoyin courtyard according to your instructions." "It's very close to your courtyard," Imama replied. "That's good. This consort will go over now. I don't know if you still remember me after 2 years, Xiao Su." Chapter 317. Has His Royal Highness eaten? He has, but he doesn't seem to have eaten much. Imama knew that her princess would definitely ask about the King of England's situation. Fortunately, she had paid more attention. Hearing this, Junmei's beautiful eyes narrowed, and a trace of displeasure flashed through them. It must be that the chef didn't cook to his satisfaction. Which chef was responsible today? Drag him out and flog him. Yes. Although her princess usually punished people for thousands of reasons, this was the first time she punished her own people for another person. Imama was a little surprised, but she still ordered people to do as ordered. Knowing that the King of England was coming, the princess had gathered famous chefs from the 8 major cuisines and kept them in the residence, hoping that they would be of use. She didn't expect to lose one on the first day. Imama didn't know what kind of storm the princess would stir up this time. Although Junmei still maintained her princess-like demeanor, her footsteps were already very fast. The maids following her were almost unable to keep up. "Princess." As soon as she arrived at the Wild Goose courtyard, Junmei slowed her steps. The guards standing in the courtyard immediately bowed their heads in greeting. "All of you leave." Junmei waved her hand to dismiss them. Junmei turned her head and wanted to dismiss Imama and the others. But then she remembered that her wet nurse's old-fashioned personality would definitely not allow her to be in the same room with a man. Thus, she said, "Mama, take the others and wait here. If there's anything, I'll call you." Imama felt that this was inappropriate. She pursed her lips and wanted to say something, but when she saw her princess's peach blossom pink face, like a young girl in love, her words choked in her throat. She could only accept the order and retreat to the side. Junmei walked to the door and raised her hand to knock, but then put it down nervously. She looked down at her clothes to see if there was anything wrong. At this moment, she was a little regretful. She had just returned from the palace. She should have returned to her room to bathe and change into new clothes before coming to visit. Forget it. She couldn't care about anything else. After gently knocking twice, she reached out and pushed the door open. Seeing her princess so nervous, Nanny was a little surprised. As the beloved princess of Junlan, no one dared to be treated like this by the princess except for the emperor. And the princess must have done as she pleased. She had never been like this before. She couldn't help but re-evaluate the status of the people in the room. Xiao Su, who was standing by the window, was not surprised at all by the guests in the room. "Princess, long time no see." As soon as Junzi Mei entered the room, she searched everywhere for his shadow. It wasn't until she met his eyes that she realized that after so many years of yearning, she had finally found the source of her illness. "Why are you dressed like this?" In his impression, he was a cold and aloof general who wore a silver mask. At this moment, he was dressed in casual clothes. Without that square mask on his facial features were also very ordinary. However, she knew that this was the person she had been waiting for 2 years. "Your Highness, you should know the reason." Xiao Su's tone was calm. He did not give her preferential treatment because of her identity. Junmei smiled slightly. Of course she knew. If she didn't know, why would she let her subordinates threaten them? With Xiao Su's temperament, if he hadn't been controlled by someone, how could he be so easily threatened? Junmei ignored his words and slowly walked up. Her eyes were filled with affection. She said tenderly, "Your Highness, 2 years have passed. Do you still remember when we met at the border? Xiao Su's tone was cold. Back then, Your Highness disguised as a woman to infiltrate your country's military camp and was caught by your brother. Both armies have heard about it. Junmei shook her head. At that time, she felt that women did not lose to men. She was dissatisfied with her imperial father's decision to only send her imperial brother to battle, so she secretly followed him. She wanted to prove to her imperial father and imperial brother that women could also make a name for themselves. Unfortunately, she was sent to guard the provisions by a deputy general who did not know her identity. That night, she encountered Xiao Su, who had raided the camp at night. Xiao Su led his fierce cavalry into the enemy's army of 100,000. They entered a place with no resistance and burned all the provisions. She couldn't stand by and watched, so she went forward to fight. However, she was knocked to the ground by a sword. Her helmet fell to the ground, and her black hair fell to her shoulders, revealing her true appearance. And it was at that moment that Imperial Brother called out, "Imperial Sister," revealing her identity. The sword that was about to reach her neck stopped an inch away, and she heard him say, "This prince doesn't kill women." When he finished speaking, he withdrew his sword. His voice was as clear as water. She absent-mindedly raised her head. In that instant, she saw him like a god under the moonlight. With one glance, she remembered his eyes, which were even more beautiful than the stars. But at that time, she resented him. She resented him for embarrassing her and exposing her identity. "Xiao Su, this princess isn't done with you." When she was helped up, she fearlessly shouted. Unfortunately, he didn't even look at her and left with his men. Junzi Mei turned to look at him with a hint of disappointment in her eyes. It was clearly a meeting between the two of them, but why did it sound as if he had completely removed himself from it? "Your Highness, don't you feel ashamed to face this princess? If you hadn't exposed me back then, my identity wouldn't have been exposed so quickly." "Is that so? This prince has already forgotten." Xiao Su's tone was still very calm. He didn't feel any change in his emotions because of the other party's coquettish rebuke. Junmei frowned. This wasn't the reunion she had imagined. She thought he would be very happy to see her. Why didn't he have any reaction at all? "Your Highness, you don't remember, but this princess remembers. I still remember sneaking into your military camp, but I was discovered by your subordinates. They brought me to you, but you didn't listen to your aides and tied me up as a hostage. Instead, you sent me back to the enemy's camp. At that time, my imperial brother was very surprised by your actions. It was also at that time that she thought he was interested in her, so she didn't make things difficult for him." Xiao Su raised his eyebrows. At that time, he had already found a flaw in Junlin's army. He didn't need to do anything unnecessary. He also disdained using hostages. Moreover, his goal wasn't just to win this battle. He also wanted Junlan to sign a non-aggression clause. There was no need to shed all pretense of cordiality. It was just that he didn't like to explain so much to insignificant people, so he remained silent and didn't speak. Junmei, who was immersed in her own fantasy and budding amorous feelings, didn't notice at all that he was ignoring her. She continued, "By the way, ever since my imperial brother fought with you, he has admired you very much. If he knows you're in my residence, he probably can't help but come looking for you. But don't worry, I won't let him know of your existence." She had other motives. She couldn't let her imperial brother get in the way. Princess Zime. After listening to her nonsense, Xiao Su felt that his patience had reached its limit. "What do you want to say to me?" Junmei, who had prepared a belly full of words, heard him speak. A faint blush appeared on her cheeks. Her hands were intertwined, and her shyness was obvious. Chapter 318. Xiao Su looked at Junzi Mei and said calmly, "Princess, when will you let us go?" Her pounding heart suddenly shrank. Junzi Mei looked at him in surprise. She thought he would tell her how much he had missed her for the past 2 years, but the truth was that he couldn't wait to leave. "Your Highness, do you not want to see Zime that much?" Junzi Mei asked word by word. "Is it important whether I see her or not?" Xiao Su couldn't understand Junzi Mei's train of thought. Just like what the little fellow said, they couldn't understand each other. Junzi Mei's eyes flashed with hurt. How could he say such hurtful words so calmly? Your Highness, do you remember that when the two armies returned, I had someone give you the token and a message that whenever you wanted to come to Junlan, you could come and go freely with the token? Why haven't you been to Junlan in the past 2 years? Junzi Mei asked, feeling wronged. Her phoenix-like eyes were watery, and she looked innocent and lovely. If it was any other man standing in front of her, he would have gone forward to comfort her. But the person in front of Junzi Mei was none other than the cold and aloof god of war, Xiao. The token is precious. I have already sent someone to return it to your royal brother and asked him to pass it on to the princess. When he heard Turin's report, he only glanced at it and waved his hand to ask him to return it. Now, whether the token was returned to Junzi Mei or not was not important to him. What? Junzi Mei's eyes widened. How could this be? Why didn't her royal brother tell her? Was he afraid that she would be sad? I only found out about the token being returned now, but I waited for you for 2 whole years. Your Highness, don't you think that as a gentleman, you should make up for your mistakes? Junzi Mei looked at him with grievance and stubbornness. The result of the token was already like this. She couldn't change it, but she had to seize the opportunity and use it to make him feel guilty. But Junzi Mei clearly didn't understand Xiao. Xiao frowned and looked at her. Princess, I think it's more appropriate for you to talk to your royal brother about this. As if a bucket of cold water had been poured over her, Junzi Mei was stunned. Her unruly personality was about to explode at this moment, but in the end, she took a deep breath. The eldest princess had told her that there was no man in the world who didn't like a woman who was as gentle as Jiyu. Therefore, she couldn't get angry. Junzi Mei decided to put this matter aside for the time being. Your Highness, she said in a soft tone, are you willing to stay in Junlan? Ben Wang is from Xixian. Xiao raised his brows. No matter when, this is a fact that cannot be changed. Junzi Mei shook her head and tried to persuade him. Your Highness, don't think that I don't know. In fact, your status in Xixian Kingdom is not even comparable to a prince born from a concubine in the Cold Palace. She can still live without worry. What about you? You have a status but always do things that are strenuous and unrewarding. What's so good about Xixian that it's worth you working so hard? Why don't you come to Junlan? My royal brother admires you. If you stay, he won't treat you unfairly. She had heard these words from her royal brother. In the past 2 years, she had asked around about him and even planted people in the Sichuan. Otherwise, how could she have found out about him so easily? Thank you for your kindness, princess, but I won't change my decision. Xiao declined. Junzi Mei was a little discouraged. Why was this person still as stubborn as before? But she quickly pulled herself together. She wasn't in a hurry, because there was plenty of time for him to change his mind. Let's not talk about those things. Today is the first time we've met after being separated for 2 years. It's a day worth remembering. I've already ordered people to prepare a table full of good food and wine to celebrate our reunion. How about it? No, it's getting late. Princess, you should go back and rest early. We'll meet again another day. After this conversation, when it came to leaving, she changed the topic. Xiao knew that she had no intention of letting them go. Since that was the case, he didn't have to deal with her anymore. Junzi Mei choked. As a princess, no one had ever dared to refuse her request. But the person in front of her had repeatedly refused her. It would be a lie to say that she wasn't angry. But this was the first time they had met after being reunited. She didn't want the two of them to have a conflict. Perhaps it was because they hadn't seen each other for 2 years and their lives had separated. As long as she was given time, she wasn't afraid that he wouldn't be moved by her. Okay, you've worked hard. Rest early. I'll come to see you tomorrow. Junzi Mei smiled and left the room. After the door was closed, Junzi Mei stood on the steps with an unsightly expression. Princess. Imama stepped forward and sensed that the princess wasn't in a good mood. Where are the people who came with the King of England arranged to stay? Junzi Mei had changed from her timid and lovable appearance in front of Xiao. Her tone was drawn out, and she had a smile that wasn't a smile. Her gaze was faint and somewhat terrifying. This old servant arranged for them to stay in the courtyard furthest from here. Imama replied. Junzi Mei nodded in satisfaction, but her smile quickly disappeared. I heard that one of them is Xiao Su's princess consort in name? Yes. Imama felt that the princess's tone was somewhat unfathomable. She didn't dare to say more and just nodded in response. Good, very good. Since the guests came from far away, we should properly entertain them. Mama, I'll leave it to you to make the arrangements. Junzi may smile, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. This old servant obeys. Imama lowered her head slightly. She knew that when the princess wanted to punish someone, she would use this kind of tone. It made people shudder. Let's go back to our rooms. I'm tired too. Yes. In the palace of Junlan, Jun Zixing was still reviewing memorials. When he saw the secret report, he frowned again. Several imperial uncles seemed to be acting strangely. Your Majesty, you have to be careful of your dragon body. It's already late. You should rest. Li Zhong, the imperial chamberlain, stepped forward to persuade him. I also want to rest, but you know that I've just ascended the throne. When my father was critically ill, I left behind a pile of state affairs to deal with. Now they've piled up like a mountain. If I don't deal with them in time and delay the state affairs, the imperial uncles will take the opportunity to cause trouble. I won't allow that to happen. Perhaps he was really too tired, so Jun Zixing said so much to him. Li Zhong was worried. Your Majesty, although you say so, you still have to take care of your dragon body. Jun Zixing rubbed his eyes and thought of something. He asked casually, did something happen in the princess's residence today? During dinner, he felt that Zi Mei was a little absent-minded. At that time, his mind was full of state affairs, so he didn't ask much. Only now did he remember. I heard that the princess sent people to detain a group of peddlers from Sichuan today. I don't know how these people offended the princess. Li Zhong didn't want to say these things to add to His Majesty's worries, but since His Majesty asked, he answered truthfully. Oh, from Sichuan? Jun Zixing narrowed his eyes. Secretly send people to investigate these people's identities. Don't let the princess find out. Yes. Li Zhong didn't know why His Majesty suddenly gave this order, but he could feel that His Majesty seemed to be in a good mood. Chapter 319. After Zhu Mei left, Turin appeared. Where did you go just now? Xiao Su glanced at him. Turin coughed softly. If I were here, I'm afraid that Princess Zimei would feel uncomfortable. In fact, what he wanted to say was that if he were here, the unruly and willful princess would do everything possible to make him leave. Rather than that, it was better for him to take the initiative to avoid her. Nonsense. Xiao Su knew his subordinate well. He just scolded him lightly and didn't say anything else. Turin saw his master frown and smelled the fragrance in the air. He immediately understood. He had been by his master's side for many years and knew that he hated the smell of rouge the most. So he walked to the windowsill and pushed it open. The night wind blew in through the open window, blowing away the strong fragrance of rouge. Xiao Su's expression softened. He walked to the table and sat down. Have you contacted the wind department? I've already contacted them, but the princess's residence is heavily guarded. They don't dare to act rashly. Turin's brows were a little worried. The wind division was also a part of the fierce cavalry, but because they did not follow their master after training, they were scattered in the surrounding countries of Xixian Nation. Usually, they would not be used casually unless it was a critical moment. Then they would be used. Moreover, the scattered fierce cavalry did not contact each other in order to hide their identities. Xiao Su was deep in thought. His fingers tapped on the table. Yes, let them wait and see. Don't act rashly. I'll think of a way to leave. Back then, the wind department had spent a lot of effort to plan in Junlan. Once they were used, it meant that years of hard work would be in vain. If his skills hadn't been restrained by the snake's kiss poison and couldn't be used casually, this small princess's residence wouldn't have been a problem at all. But because of the covetous eyes of those people in Sichuan, he couldn't act rashly. If he moved one hair, the whole body would be affected. At that time, the pursuers wouldn't only be in Junlan. He had never fallen into such a difficult situation, but Xiao Su wasn't discouraged. Turin, let Xingyan feel at ease, but at the same time, be vigilant. Xiao Su ordered. Turin nodded. Before falling asleep, Chu Qingyin received a message from Big Ice Cube. She breathed a sigh of relief. An XIN meant that she didn't have to worry about the trip to Jiang country. Vigilance meant that she had to be careful of the people in the princess's residence. After Turin finished talking, he was about to leave through the window, but the young princess stopped him. Is there anything else, young master? Turin was a little confused. Yes. Chu Qingyin walked to the table, picked up the brush, and dipped it in ink. After thinking for a moment, she drew on the paper, blew it dry, and handed it to him. Turin didn't read the content inside. He folded it and left. When Xiao Su opened the piece of paper, he was a little confused at first, but soon a smile appeared in his eyes. What a mischievous kid. Under the candlelight, the drawing on the paper was exceptionally clear. On a plate was a piece of tofu. On the tofu was a pair of crossed chopsticks. On the empty space was a big smiley face. He didn't know whether it was to tell Xiao Su not to take advantage of others or not to be taken advantage of. But no matter what she meant, Xiao Su didn't think that this situation would happen at all. Master, the young princess said that she will wait for your reply. Otherwise, she won't fall asleep. Turin felt that he was using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. He had actually become the messenger of two masters. Xiao Su raised his eyebrows. This little girl was fooling around and didn't forget to use him to threaten him. It seemed that she was itching for a beating. He didn't need to reply to her childish behavior, but he still picked up the brush and wrote a sentence on the paper. Then he asked Turin to bring it over. When Turin knocked on the window, Chu Qingyin felt that her upper and lower eyelids were about to fight. After she took the letter from Turin's hand, she couldn't wait to open it. She saw a sentence written on it. 100 pages. What the hell? Punish her to write big characters. Was there a mistake? 100 pages. Her hand would break, okay? After this blow, Chu Qingyin had nothing left to live for. She felt that it was necessary to sleep and calm down at this moment. When Xiao Su learned of her reaction, he revealed a look of understanding. After witnessing the interaction between the two masters, Turin also felt that he had nothing left to live for. He was clearly the leader of the secret guards. How did he become a messenger boy? He also had to calm down. In the silent night, the Sichuan was still searching through the night. Unfortunately, they didn't know that the person they were looking for had crossed the border and arrived in another country. The night passed quickly. The morning sun rose, and the white dew was still shining. Chu Qingyin got up lazily. During this period of time, they had been hurrying on the road and hadn't had a good rest. She was worried that they would encounter a coup d'état in Junlan, but she didn't expect that they were still destined to suffer this ordeal. So last night, she didn't think too much about it. She enjoyed the treatment in the princess residence to relieve the fatigue of these days. Hearing the movement in the room, Xining walked in with a basin of water. She smiled and said, "Master, did you sleep well last night?" "Not bad. How about you?" Chu Qingyin got out of bed and moved her hands a little. "This servant also felt that I had a good sleep. The servant's room in the princess residence is even better than our Sichuan. This servant didn't even want to get up this morning." Xining rubbed the brocade cloth and turned to hand it to her master. Hearing this, Chu Qingyin's face stiffened. "Xining, are you blaming the prince's residence for not treating you well?" Xining knew that she had misspoken and hurriedly apologized. "This servant didn't mean that. Master, don't be angry." Seeing her flustered appearance, Chu Qingyin couldn't help but laugh. At this time, Xining was stupid if she couldn't tell that her master was teasing her. She stomped her feet. "Master, it's fine that Jean Xin ignores this servant, but now you're teasing this servant. This is too much." Chu Qingyin held her shoulder and said with a smile, "Little girl, do you know what I'm looking forward to in the future?" "What is it?" Xining was naive and was immediately attracted by the topic. Eating, sleeping, and teasing Xining. Chu Qingyin ran off after saying that. "Master, you're bullying me again." Xining reacted belatedly and immediately chased after her master. As Chu Qingyin ran, she thought, "This little girl is so gullible. Should I trick her into studying and learning how to read?" For example, when De Bing punished her to write big characters last night, she would have had a helper, right? Poor Xining didn't know that she had been tricked by her master onto the path of deceit. You're in such a good mood early in the morning. What did Bing say to you last night? Chung Yinluo stood at the side with her arms crossed and looked at the noisy couple with a smile. He punished me by making me copy characters. Chu Qingyin took the time to reply. Chung Yinluo was overjoyed. You're happy to punish you? It seems that you two have a good relationship. Chu Qingyin rolled her eyes. How could she tell that she was happy to be punished? After the commotion, it was almost noon. Nanny Yi, who had disappeared early in the morning, appeared in front of Chu Qingyin. She raised her chin and said arrogantly, Her Highness the Princess is hosting a banquet in the West Pavilion. Please follow this old servant. Chu Qingyin and Chung Yinluo looked at each other and communicated silently. Banquet at Hongmin? I think so. Are we going or not? Who's afraid? Chapter 320. Zhu Mei had set up a banquet to entertain them. Chu Mu's mother had caught a cold on the way here and was unable to attend. Thus, only Chu Qingyin, Chung Yinluo, and Chu Mu's father were present. Huo Ling and Xining were accompanying them. When Chu Qingyin and the others arrived, there was still no one at the main seat. After all, important people would always appear at the last moment. Thus, Chu Qingyin and the others sat down and waited. But this wait gave them the illusion that it would take forever. As soon as they arrived at the banquet, Chu Qingyin had guessed that Princess Zimei would make things difficult for them. Sure enough, it was as she had expected. It was winter now, and even during the day, it was still very cold. The banquet was set up in a pavilion, and there were no screens on all sides. The cold wind immediately poured in. The pavilion was empty, and there wasn't even a heater. Xining's face had clearly turned pale. Chu Qingyin frowned and asked the maidservant standing by the side, When will your princess arrive? Can you give an exact time? The maidservants had already received the message and had already replied. The princess is honorable. Her whereabouts are actually known to us servants. They acted as if their princess was the most important, and they could only wait. Oh, I thought that your Jumlin's real estate was rich and that we would be able to eat our fill this time. So I happily came to the banquet. Who knew that we would be drinking the northwest wind? Haha, it seems that the greater the hope, the greater the disappointment. Chung Yinluo was dissatisfied with the maidservants' arrogant faces and couldn't help but retort. Sigh, you can't even afford a heater. Boo-hoo, you're even poorer than our little thatched cottage. Chu Mu's father also spoke up. Chung Yinluo nodded. That's right, that's right. Although our little thatched cottage is small, we still have all the essentials. Yes, yes, yes. I'm almost full from drinking the northwest wind. Kai, why don't we go back? I miss your mother's rice cakes. She won't even give me a piece of cake here. Chu Mu's father looked aggrieved. Looking at the purple faces of the servants of the princess residence, it was obvious that they were very angry. They were maids from noble families and thought highly of themselves. When had they ever heard Yin Luo and her father's sarcastic words? Moreover, they were so easy to find fault with. It was hard for them not to jump up in anger. Chu Qingyin pursed her lips and smiled. She knew that all of this was directed at her. If Princess Zimei really liked Big Ice Cube, then she would be her #1 love rival. After all, the title of the future king of England's concubine was hers, not hers. However, to be able to scheme against a 10-year-old child, it was enough to prove that this person was not a broad-minded person who was easy to deal with. Maybe it's because the princess has too many things to do. As magnanimous adults, we don't need to be too calculative with her. Chu Qingyin was praising the princess on the surface, but belittling her in secret. The maids were angry, but they didn't dare to say anything. What she said was indeed exculpating their princess, but it sounded awkward. All right, we'll wait for a while. If she doesn't come soon, we can go back for dinner. Chung Yinluo seemed to have bought Chu Qingyin's account and reluctantly agreed. They couldn't really leave. Firstly, they were curious about the famous Princess Zimei. Secondly, she was the mistress of the residence and the princess of a country. It was better not to disrespect her easily. If there was any evidence that could be used against them, the loss would outweigh the gain. However, if someone wanted to save face, they would beat her up. These maids thought highly of themselves and didn't treat them as guests. They didn't care, but Chu Qingyin and Cheng Yinluo didn't like to be ridden on by others. Therefore, they joined hands to beat them up. Since the princess was not here, they would torture these maids. "Miss, do you have a heater in your residence?" Since they didn't know how long they would have to wait, they still wanted to enjoy the treatment. Therefore, Chu Qingyin asked them politely. When the maids heard Chu Qingyin and Cheng Yinluo's conversation, they were already gnashing their teeth in hatred. However, they didn't think that if they didn't mistreat them, they wouldn't have to make oblique accusations. One of the maids said, "Recently, the residence has been changing a lot of utensils. I'm afraid there aren't any extra. Please bear with it for a while." "So, it's like that." Chu Qingyin sighed softly, expressing her regret. "We must have caused a lot of trouble for the princess by staying in your residence, and we feel bad about it. Your residence does not have any extra heaters, but we have a few left over. We can use them to help you with your urgent needs, and we can also express our gratitude." Then, without waiting for the maids to react, she turned to Hualing and said, "Have Mu Ling send a few heaters over." Hualing glanced at the maids who couldn't refuse because of the young princess consort's high-sounding reason and secretly smiled as she agreed. Mu Ling quickly sent them over. Chu Qingyin looked at the pavilion that was slowly warming up and seemed to have thought of something. They all said that the residence's utensils are being changed. Then there definitely aren't any screens. "Mu Ling, have your people make a few screens and send them over later." "Little princess, there's no need to wait. This subordinate can make them now." Which one of Xiao Su's subordinates wasn't a shrewd person? They knew that the other party was holding today's banquet in order to suppress the young princess consort's momentum. When they heard Hualing's description, they already had people prepare cloth. They chopped a few pieces of bamboo and quickly pieced them together. For the 5 screens were made on the spot. The speed was so fast that it was dazzling. Those maids who wanted to stop them didn't even have the chance to speak. Moreover, they were scared speechless by these people's abilities. "Wow, so your subordinates have this kind of skill? If I knew earlier, I would have had them help me make some furniture when I was in the medical hall." Cheng Yinluo said regretfully. Mu Ling and the others' hands trembled. When they repaired the roof last time, they had already turned the thatched hut into a tall brick house according to her request. What else did this young lady want to do? Chu Qingyin blinked and smiled slyly. "We've already waited for more than 2 hours. It's already past lunchtime. It seems that the princess will also miss dinner time. Why don't we hold a small banquet and eat while waiting for Princess Zime's arrival? Otherwise, if something happens to us due to hunger, the princess won't be able to accompany us when she arrives. Wouldn't that be a sin?" The maids looked at each other. What else did they want to do? "Mu Ling, I want to make a barbecue rack." As Chu Qingyin spoke, she began to gesture. Mu Ling suddenly understood after hearing this. His heart itched. "All right, this subordinate will do it now." So Mu Ling immediately began to work outside the pavilion. Chu Qingyin turned to Hualing and said, "Just the utensils aren't enough. We're still missing some ingredients. I'll leave it to you." Hualing smiled slyly. "I won't let you down." In a flash, he disappeared. There was a mountain behind the princess residence. It was said that aside from fierce beasts, there was everything one could think of. The barbecue rack was ready. Fish, rabbits, pheasants, and pigeons were all prepared. Cheng Yinluo rolled up her sleeves. Her eyes were filled with interest as she said, "Leave these to me. You can just wait to eat." She already knew how to use these things. When she was gathering herbs, she had roasted many things before, so she was naturally proficient at it. Chu Qingyin smiled. The pavilion had already warmed up, so she would just leave it to Yinluo and the others. At this time, she saw a maid lift her skirt and leave the pavilion. She knew that she was going to deliver a message. Chu Qingyin ignored her. She was afraid that Junmei wouldn't come. If she didn't come, who was she putting on this show for? You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.